Greetings, Mavericks and new viewers. Tonight, direct and live from the Maverick News Network World Studios. This is Maverick News with Rick Walker.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to the Maverick News Channel. Great to have everybody here again tonight. Hello, Maverick family. We have a special broadcast tonight and a very special guest about to join us, Sarah Sala, an online influencer, TikTok rising sensation. I came to be aware of her the other night when I woke up in the middle of the night, and as you know, I have videos running all night long, absorbing information through osmosis, and there was Sarah, and she had this huge audience listening to what she was talking about. And she'd been on this marathon broadcast talking about all kinds of things related to culture and economics and politics. And she really caught my attention because she sees the world in a much different way than I do. I think probably a lot different than a lot of old people like me. And so I'm really excited to have her on the program tonight. I teed this up the other night for you guys. I told you she's going to join us, and she's waiting in the back room. This is going to be a great conversation because I think it will be enlightening. It will help us all understand how today's generation views politics, the West, America, Canada, the world. It's a whole new world out there, and I'm very excited to have this conversation. We'll probably get into some of the top stories of the day today as well. During the broadcast, a historic church in Toronto caught fire. The European Union, elections over there, the results coming in, very surprising results for some, not so much for me. You see the right people on the right side of the political spectrum, major gains over there. We'll get into some of that stuff, but I'm really excited to have the conversation with Sarah. So that's front and center, coming right up on the other side of this. Don't go away.
Fighting the Great Reset by leading the Great Resistance. Maverick News. The antivirus programs for your mind. Greetings, brave Mavericks. Our quest for truth continues. We go beyond fake news. Together we expose propaganda. Together we pull others out of rabbit holes. We are Maverick thinkers. We are all unique individuals, defenders of individual rights and freedoms, credible, trusted, grounded in reality. Maverick News. Defending free speech. Donate at freedomreporters.com. Do it now. Tomorrow may be too late. Maverick News. The world is watching.
Okay, I'm back, and let's bring her right in, right off the top. Here she is. Hello, Sarah. Welcome to the program.
Hi, it's an honor to be here.
Well, it's a privilege to have you with us tonight. I'm so glad that you could join us. I'm very excited to have this conversation with you. It's going to be a great discussion. So let's just, I was just thinking, do you follow RFK Jr., the presidential candidate? No? You know he had a worm in the brain?
No, I did not know that.
It's true. It's true. At one point, he had a worm in the brain. I was just thinking about it again because I say that our program is the antivirus program for your mind, and then I was thinking, yeah, RFK Jr. needs to watch this because he had a worm in his brain. Anyway, that was a long time ago. You can look it up. It's a real story.
Yeah.
We covered it here. Anyway, welcome, and please just introduce yourself. Let people know who you are.
Honestly, I'm just your regular girl. I am 19, so I'm pretty young to compared to your audience and regular people that you tend to have on the show, which is really an honor to have. You know, because I'm so young, people tend to not want to really hear what the youth have to bring to the table and have to say. So it means a lot. But yeah, I'm just your regular girl who tends to speak online. Um, and I have a lot of opinions and a lot of thoughts. And yeah.
Well, that's why I want to talk to you because we do talk to politicians. I've interviewed presidents and prime ministers and premiers. I even covered the Queen at one point. But that's how old I am. Okay, but honestly, these are the conversations I enjoy most because this is real, right? You talk to politicians, all of that stuff is kind of prefabricated. You're getting talking points. This
Yeah.
is about life and how people are affected by policies and the way real people deal with real things. And I'm very interested in the way your generation views things. So you have how many people did you have watching that night when I was watching you on TikTok?
Yeah. I remember in total, there was about maybe 3K. But I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure for every hour was about approximately around 300 to 600.
I mean,
Uh,
I've only just started to run stuff on TikTok, and I was like, wow, I can't believe how many people are watching this young lady. And it really was amazing. And a 6 hour marathon that you had going on, and you were just talking about all these different issues, and I want to kind of go over some of those things again with you tonight to give you an opportunity to share your voice here and
yeah.
explain to me how why you, not only what you think, but why you think that way. So
hmm
I'm hoping you can kind of clarify that. So
Yeah.
what were the I guess sort of the main topics of discussion? I didn't see all 6 hours. So
Yeah.
what were the main things that you were trying to touch on the other night?
Um, I did address how I am United States' biggest hater. At the moment, that was why, and I was addressing like all of some history and some background to what led up to why I hate the United States and their leaders and Canadians' economy and how Canada and the United States go hand in hand and dating culture and like why I think there's like a really high rate of divorce rates and people getting cheated on,
Mhm.
and like casual dating, and like Western feminism, and those were like the main topics of like what I was bringing up.
Right. And of course, connected to your issues around America, you were touching on the situation in Gaza.
hmm
I think you talked a little bit about what's going on in Ukraine,
Yeah,
right? Yeah. So maybe we can talk a little bit about that tonight as well.
yeah,
Um, so first of all, we'll come to all the America stuff. That stuff makes me really sad. You know, everything going on in politics these days is so, I think, depressing. But
yeah.
we'll come back to it. Let's start with the relationship stuff. I'm very interested in that because we see huge shifts in our culture. Our the way that people view religion, for instance. Fewer and fewer people going to church. Um, I think technology, whether it's the development of the birth control pill or even the proliferation of adult video content online, I think
Yeah.
it's changed the dynamics in relationships. What are your thoughts on those things?
And I think we've sexualized a bunch of things due to that industry. And I think that industry plays like a huge part. Um, and um, yeah, it's really sad to see. And I really think in the end, like, I know we all tend to say, like, let's push religion aside. And, it's a really touchy subject. But I really think that, religion ties down with everything. It really ties down to your morals and your beliefs and um, discipline, even. And I think we tend to not want to believe it, but it's a pill that we do need to eventually swallow. Um, yeah.
Interesting. So you're Muslim, right?
Yeah.
Is what you said the other night.
Hmm.
And it's interesting because I find that the people that I know who are Muslim, they I think have pretty what I would call conservative views when it
Hmm.
comes to relationships,
Hmm.
and that almost kind of aligns with a lot of the serious Christians that I know as well, especially evangelical Christians. Do you find there's alignment there between those two groups?
Yeah. So from my understanding, I, and even me, I genuinely think that like relationships before marriage are just, triggered by lust.
Hmm.
So, and
Sexual attraction. Sure.
yeah, exactly. So,
Mm-hmm.
and I used to, I'm a person that I don't like to be repressed and I don't like to follow rules. Um, so it was really hard when I was younger to like wrap my mind around it. Um, and so wasn't really a religious person my whole life. Um, but later when I understood that, there's certain rules and not within religion, but just around the world, rules are set for reasons. And so I later understood why, before marriage, relationships before that, it's a waste of time. It's messy. It's painful. Um, yeah.
So what? Tell me about your family background. Where
Yeah.
did your family come from? And just give me the information there.
Yeah. So I personally was born in Egypt and then I was raised in Canada my whole life. But both of my parents are from Iraq. Um, yeah.
Okay, so that kind of gives us the lay of the land there. Now, do you have a
Mm.
lot of a large family here in Canada now?
No, actually, my family is kind of around the world. Like I have some in London, I have some in Turkey, some in Dubai. They're all everywhere. Yeah.
I see. So, how well versed would you say your family is in say Canadian or U.S. history? Given that your family, when did they come here?
They've come in here about, I would say 2000 and maybe 2008.
Okay,
Sorry, no, 2010. I think
2010.
2010.
And so, when were you born?
I was born 2005.
In Egypt,
Yeah.
and then you moved here a few years later. So you were how
Yeah.
old when you got to Canada?
I would say about maybe 3 or 4. Yeah.
How did you? So you were quite young, and so by the time you went to school, were you already speaking English, or did you need to learn English when you got here? How did that go for you?
Yeah. So, I was speaking, but I started like I my speak was delayed because of the mix-up with
Hmm.
Arabic and English.
Right.
Um, and so I started having some delays in that. Um, so I do remember having to go to speech therapy. Um, but I do remember being able to talk English, but I don't think so. It was the best.
Yeah, that's okay. I still get confused with English. I took Spanish in college, and now I just mix it all up with my French that I took in elementary
Mhm.
school, and I'm just a mess. So it's fine.
Yeah, no,
That's what
but
it means to be Canadian.
yeah.
So the relationship thing.
Hmm.
Why do you think people today then suffer from such high divorce rates and fewer people getting married and all of that?
Yeah. Um, honestly, let's go through this. Okay, so
Yeah.
I don't believe that love is real. You know, like how people say like, "Oh, I've fallen in love. I've had my first love," or, I personally believe that love is everywhere. Um, and I don't think that you can just, you know, fall in love, or, I think love gets built up within time. I think love is when you compromise something for your partner, when you do certain things for your partner. And I just think that love, is not real. And I think it's all built up within lust and artificial things and like all of that.
Hmm.
Um, and when they say that like honeymoon phase, so that's what I like. I really believe that love isn't real because of that. It's literally like you genuinely get a hormone produced. You know when they say like love is a drug,
Hmm.
they quite literally mean it. You get the same hormones and serotonin and everything built up from the same reaction when you genuinely inject drugs. It's the same exact thing. And so that's why it's like I feel like casual dating is literally the downfall of us because, you know, look at it as like, when someone casually does drugs and then they do it another and then again and then again, it's not going to be the same. And it's just, it's a whole mess. And that's what I think. It's like, you date one person, then you jump to another and then another. And then, first of all, you're not going to be fulfilled sexually, spiritually, emotionally. Like, it's just not the same. So that's why I feel like it plays a huge impact. And that's why I genuinely think, you know, divorce rates are high and, people are cheating one another. And, I just think it's, back in your days, was cheating a huge scandal?
Yes, it was, but you see, the sexual revolution really came about more in like the 60s with you know, the development of the birth control pills. So it freed women in new ways that they had never been able to be free before.
Yeah,
To explore sexualities, he had the whole free love thing going on, and that continued all through the 70s, and that continued right up until the AIDS
yeah,
scare, right? And then everything kind of changed because people were scared, much like the pandemic.
yeah,
When that first hit, there was all kinds of paranoia and I would say even discrimination and prejudice attached to that, generated from the fear,
yeah,
especially fear of people from the gay community at the time. So that changed the nature of relationships. And then the technology also changed over time because I saw even, if you go back to the 1950s with Hugh Hefner and uh, Playboy magazine, I mean,
hmm,
that stuff today seems very tame, but back at that time, that was very risque.
yeah,
And then you had, the development of film, television, then
hmm,
videotapes, right? And video
yeah,
rental. So that changed everything. And so now today, we're at a point where, when I was growing up, there was no pornography on
yeah,
television at all, period. And there was no internet. There were some, Playboy magazines and things like that you could buy and things, but no, you didn't have access to that stuff the way that it's just readily available today. And I think young people, whether it doesn't matter how much they say they try to restrict access to adults online, it's
hmm,
just out there, and kids are seeing it, and it's just like this constant flow, if you choose to look at it, of adult material, and that has to have some really serious impact, I think, on people's psychology.
Oh, 100%. And just like the way that you view relationships and your sexual being, and just it really does. And especially for kids. And we can deny that, but we know deep down that there are kids accessing this. And not, let's push aside like how it affects adults, but then kids
Hmm.
in a horrible way, like ways that we can't even imagine.
So, do you tell me about your experience with that and the way that you interact with other young people, both male
Yeah.
and female?
Mhm.
What, how, tell me how you think that has affected the way, say, that young men ask young women out on a date, or vice versa. In my day, it was pretty traditional.
Mhm.
Basically, like when I met my wife, I was scared to death, and I met her in a store, a men's clothing store, and I didn't have the courage to ask her out, so I left, and then I came back later, and bought a shirt so that I
Mhm.
could just speak to her, and ask her if she would go out on a date with me, and she said,
That's I
"Well,
appreciate.
okay."
Yeah, like I feel like now, like compared to like your story, like now if I was to say, like we don't even, like half of the girls that I know, they've never even got properly asked now. Like they're it's way different than back then. And um you know we tend to get mixed up now because there's no lines, that we tend to get mixed up with like hookup culture and casual dating, and
Mhm.
it's just all mixed up in one. um so I Yeah.
And see, even sexuality, like the sex thing,
Hmm.
it was pretty free even when I was young. Not as much with me as with a lot of the people, my friends, but it was free then. But I think today, it's you. I mean, you tell me, because I'm not in that sphere.
Yeah.
Okay, so you tell me how free and open is it?
Oh God. Oh God, honestly, in the best way. And it's like, honestly, I genuinely think we've become animals, like brainless animals. And I don't want to say all, but I will say like us, at like as a generation, I think, again, we're just so lost. And, with this we've become so hypersexualized, and, hookup culture just so normalized. And I think we tend to forget even what sex is. It's, just for reproduction.
Hmm.
Um, and for pleasure, but to a certain extent.
Yeah, I no, I don't know. I don't know because I'm old, so I don't know what's going on out there. I haven't got a clue. That's why you're here to explain it to me, so I can
Yeah.
get up to speed on what the heck is going on out there. I have a sense, but I really don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, when I went on that first date with my wife, she kissed me. I didn't kiss her.
Hmm. It's cute. It's cute. Levels.
It was like, I don't want to do anything wrong, so it's like she grabbed me and kissed me. So, yeah,
It's cute. But
but that's
yeah,
is probably a lot different now.
100%. We usually don't even have a first date. It's usually just let's jump in.
Mm.
Um, and most majority of times we don't even have, boyfriend or girlfriend. I mean, we do. I would be lying if I said that, but it's we usually have to, because of how normalized hookup culture. It's usually like it's so normal to be like, yeah, we're just hooking up. We're just friends with benefits. They're just my thing that I tend to see here and there, and then I have this other person that I'm seeing here and there, and it's just this whole mess. But I don't, again, like I don't believe this is all of us as individuals, but majority, you will see people in my generation. struggling with this.
Hmm. Well, the thing that really got my attention the other night was, the political discussions, and, and I like to talk about economics a fair bit here too. So I'm really curious about your views on that stuff. How would you describe yourself politically? Do you align with any particular political ideology?
Um, honestly, I'm not the best in like political stuff. Like, I would say I have certain political views, but they're not labeled. I just, have certain views and certain opinions. But yeah, I wouldn't even say I'm the best within following up with the news and, certain
Mm-hmm.
leaders and knowing up, but I tend to try to knowledge myself because, knowledge is power, and it's really stupid to be, choosing to, be ignorant and covering your eyes when there's certain issues happening just
Yeah.
because it doesn't affect me as an individual.
So where do you go? Do you go to school right now?
Honestly, right now I'm just working.
Okay. So
Yeah.
have you graduate? Did you graduate from high school? Is that what's
Yeah.
happened? And are you planning to go to college or university?
Yeah. So I've taken some courses with college. I've taken psychology, I've taken addictions, but I'm planning to do my PSW and then get into nursing. Yeah.
Personal support worker. Okay.
Yeah.
So you want to go into healthcare.
Yeah.
I see. Well, you seem to be pretty tuned in to politics, and you seem to have some pretty strong opinions about
Yeah.
things. When you were in high school, or did you take some courses that got you interested in politics, or do you follow stuff online? Where do you get your viewpoints from?
Honestly, I do try to stay connected within like social media. So I do think like social media has some benefits to it. But yeah, I always try to, stay connected and have these conversations with people. But I used to not really be a political person, but ever since um, what was happened in, Palestine, it
Mhm.
really, I genuinely felt like it was my duty to start, sharing my opinions and being more knowledgeable within my platform and within the conversations I have in my daily life, because that's just like my ancestors. I'm not Palestinian, but I'm Arab, and I feel again it's my duty. Um, yeah.
So tell me, uh, now you've piqued my interest. I want to know how you view the conflict in Gaza right now, the
Mhm.
Palestine Israel conflict.
Yeah.
You tell me the story the way that you understand it.
Well, let me start this with it's no longer a conflict, it's a genocide. And so I feel very strong against it because we're reading and hearing things that we're learning in textbooks and we're seeing, and same thing that's happening, and we're just watching happen again, but we're doing nothing about it. So but how I view it is, yeah, I view it as a genocide. I don't view it as a conflict. um and when you really really do your history on it, it's people tend to think that it started from October 7th, but it's been happening way way longer. um so that's my view on it.
Okay. So how do you view what happened on October 7th?
It's I'm not gonna sit here and say I don't have empathy for from people in Israel, but it was bound to happen, and I'm not saying, oh, I love the violence. I wish no violence, and I wish no one to be hurt.
Mhm.
But I think it was bound to happen. It was defense. It's been happening for years and years and years, and you know it's a shame, but it was bound to happen. And it was only defensive. And then
So you view what happened on October 7th as a defensive action.
Yeah.
Okay. And you feel it was justified?
I don't think anything is justified. I don't think war is
Mhm.
justified. I don't think so. Um, but I think personally that situation, I think I'm not going to agree that it was right, but
Mhm.
it was bound to happen.
Okay. How do you define genocide? Because for me, genocide is as much a legal term
Hmm.
as anything else, right? It's like, how do you define that?
Yeah.
Massacre is one thing. You know, you can use a whole bunch of words. For me, I think genocide needs to be reserved for very specific, you know, kinds of war crimes or a specific kind of war crime,
Well, there are
because
things
it's like I think the ultimate horrific act of war crime, right?
yeah.
So, but there, I think there are a variety of definitions used by people.
Yeah.
So how would you justify the use of the phrase genocide in this
Yeah.
case?
Well, like you said, exactly. For someone who is committing war crimes and a massacre, so that is exactly what's happening. They have committed a lot of war crimes, and bombing schools, bombing hospitals. Um, I wouldn't really. There is no other word to really um, to address it. If I would address it a different way, that would be very ignorant of me.
Because, you know, to me, a genocide is an attempt to completely exterminate a
Yeah.
group of people based on their culture or their religion
Mm.
or maybe their language. You
Yeah.
can even have what some people would characterize as a cultural genocide, which
Yeah.
is what some people say is, you know, some people say that's what was attempted here in North America with First Nations peoples.
Yeah.
So, you know, it depends on how people characterize these things
Yeah.
and how it's defined. I personally, I'm not sure that my personal opinion that what's going on in Gaza with the Palestinians rises to the level of a genocide. I certainly view it as a lot of war crimes on both sides, for
Mhm.
which I think people should be held accountable. But you know, again, that's for me. It's more of a legal definition. I think we both agree, though, that it's a tragedy and horrific, and war crimes have been committed.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, what really makes you think that it isn't really a genocide?
because I'm not sure that it rises to the level, even though because we're still in a state of war, and there's a lot of information propaganda out there that is exaggerated on all sides. And so,
Hmm.
in the fog of information warfare, you're getting exaggeration. I'm not sure that the numbers we're getting are accurate,
Hmm.
and also I'm not sure that what is happening in there ultimately is like, as people are using the phrase ethnic cleansing, I'm
Hmm.
not sure that that's actually what ultimately is taking place.
Yeah.
So until we get all facts in, I am reluctant to use that phrase genocide, because I think that phrases like that need to be reserved for very specific instances in periods of time.
Hmm.
Otherwise, those they get watered down and they become meaningless. You
Hmm.
need to have that needs to be the strongest of war crimes, and it needs to be reserved for that. For instance, you know, the Holocaust, that was a, you know, a genocidal act by
Hmm.
Nazi Germany, right? To
Let me ask
me,
you a question. Do
yeah.
you think, though, what's
Mhm.
happening in Palestine is not very, 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 very similar to what happened in the Holocaust?
No, I don't think that it is
In what?
myself, because the what was going on in Nazi Germany at the time was a choreographed, systematic, just factory extermination of
But
people.
is that exactly what Israel's doing?
No, I don't believe that that's exactly what's going on. I think that you're getting a lot of propaganda that illustrates it in that way.
Mm-hmm.
And right now, propaganda is being used by both sides,
And it's
but there's a real heavy duty propaganda machine in play on the pro-Palestinian side, coming from a variety of nations, and they're using everything. They are, see, and working in media all my life, I remember the Vietnam War.
Mm-hmm.
That was the very first conflict that came into people's living rooms through television sets.
Mm-hmm.
And because people could see every night at 6 p.m. on the nightly news footage from Vietnam of people being killed,
Yeah.
it quickly shifted the public opinion on the war.
Mm-hmm.
So that you then ended up with these huge anti-war protests in the streets, and even anti-American protests in the streets. And so that was the effects of media and technology at that time. What we're seeing today, though, is even more amplified. And I would argue that what we're getting is not really a completely clear perspective on any side at this point, because it's constant information warfare, and they're using artificial intelligence to create videos. They're making sure that, on the pro-Palestinian side, what I'm seeing is the gratuitous use of violent footage. They want to show the world every baby that was killed. And they are doing that. There's no filter. It's like, so they're putting all of this stuff out. And they, in fact, here, I'll show you what I mean. Right here, I'll put this up. And I think this kind of makes my point. Not to say that I'm trying to diminish what's going on in there. I'm about accuracy and facts.
Yeah.
And proper perspective, right? So here is a video from today. Just on, all right. Let me just pull this down. So you see hostage rescue, Palestinian new numbers. Palestinians, this is on some site called Open Source Intel. Palestinians, yes, the ones who hold hostages, now report that the death toll from yesterday's hostage operation has risen to 274 with 698 wounded. Take this with a grain of salt. They need to frame the situation in a way that portrays themselves as the victims. And so, as I've said from the beginning of the conflict, and I think it was a huge mistake for Netanyahu to go ahead with this major offensive in Gaza. First of all, it's not going to achieve the military objective I think that he thinks it will. Secondly, in today's fifth generation warfare environment, Hamas and the Palestinian side, they're fighting more of an information war than they are a kinetic war. And they're winning by losing.
And what side?
On the Palestinian side. You see, they're losing the war on the ground because they're so many people are being killed and there's so much destruction. But they're winning the actual war because they're winning in the court of public opinion. And they're putting more and more pressure on governments because they're winning the information war. And that's why I say what I'm watching online is not really an accurate representation. I also see heavily produced videos glorifying or sensationalizing the violence being regurgitated and used over and over again by the pro-Palestinian streamers that I see, who claim to be journalists, but I would say that they're political activists and even propagandists. Not just raw footage like you would kind of see out of the Vietnam era, but this is like they're taking violent videos of, say, even Israeli soldiers being killed, and then they produce it. They add music and graphics. They speed it up. They slow it down. They add effects to make it look like an action film. And that sanitizes it. It makes it more of just a palatable movie for people. And then they cheerlead while they show actual human beings being killed. And they show the victims. I saw more, excuse me, folks, I don't mean to shock you, but more dead babies and close-ups of the faces and these things. I'll tell you, like, there's a million deaths is a statistic. One dead baby is very human, and people relate to that in a very emotional way. So they're using that as a weapon against, right?
Seeing as a weapon, because how else can you glamorize it if we're telling people that yes, we are struggling, yes, we are being occupied, yes, and no one's this isn't a war crime, but if how else can we share the message that okay, it's not just us, it's not just Hamas, it's normal civilians, okay, and not just adults, not just hospitals, not just schools, babies, it's everyone. And I wouldn't.
And then, but on the other side, I see the propaganda machine is so effective on the Palestinian side, and I think a lot of the propaganda is actually coming from like a media machine out of Iran. Honestly, I think they've got a very sophisticated propaganda and media team over there that is pumping the stuff out. Not only are they sensationalizing and propagating the stuff coming right out of Gaza, they've also launched this secondary wave of information warfare where it's to discredit all of the things that happened on October 7th, to the point where I'm bombarded with people who say that it didn't even happen, and that the Israelis killed all their own people, that the Palestinians that went in, the Hamas attackers, didn't even kill anybody. They didn't, and it's the strangest thing. When there are rocket attacks or missile attacks against Israel, the narrative is, well, why, Israel's having a lot of trouble intercepting those rockets. They're just letting them through on purpose. It's the strangest thing, but it's this information warfare where people's minds are kind of twisted around, where it's like everything that Israel does, any attack against Israel, it's Israel's fault for not stopping it, or it's a bizarre thing. I see the same techniques being used, honestly, against the West, against the United States, against Canada. It doesn't matter what bad thing happens over here. It's the fault. It's their own fault. It's the United States' own fault. They probably did it to themselves. 9/11 was an inside job. All of these things. So that's what I'm seeing. Not to say that everything is that way, because I see propaganda coming from the Israeli side too. John, my friend John, we have long debates about this stuff. When I saw the female reporter on October 7th after the attack standing there saying that the babies had been beheaded, I was like, instantly, being a media guy, I said, that looks like propaganda to me. That reporter is exaggerating. I see no proof of that. And until I see actual proof, I'm saying that that's highly questionable and quite possibly propaganda. And of course, that's been a real point of dispute throughout all of this. That's why, as a journalist, I sit here and I say, I will not ever lie to people, because if you get caught in one lie, then everything you say is thrown into question. Yeah. So I do my very best to be honest with people. It's my integrity is everything. So I'll throw it to you.
Yeah, well, wouldn't you say propaganda itself, for mentioning only October 7th and then brushing everything that happened previously before under the rug?
Okay, so there's the larger question, right? And this is why one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you tonight, because I'm interested in the history as you know it, and then I will tell you the history as I know it. And so I'm not sure that they're going to mesh, because the other thing that I've seen going on for years now is very Orwellian. I see postmodernist, revisionist history being taught. It's taken me some time to wrap my head around it, because sometimes I'm listening to professors who are teaching this postmodern, revisionist kind of history. And and they're like, this guy's an expert, or this journalist over here is an expert. And I'm listening to them and I'm thinking, how stupid am I? I didn't know that. But then I've come to realize something. They're changing the history to the point where it's like I don't even recognize some of it. And that's why I've sat here some nights and I'm like, what the hell are they talking about? I don't know any of this. And it's because it's like, are you familiar with George Orwell?
No.
Okay, so his novel 1984, which predicts, a lot of what's been going on here in the future. Like they literally, in the novel 1984, they engage in something called newspeak, which is kind of propaganda, and they literally rewrite history.
Yeah.
Okay, so they take and they revise it so that it fits what the governing, the government of that day wants people to believe, and they confuse people to the point where things don't even make sense anymore, and it's called newspeak. That is what I see going on, and we really are living, in many respects now, in an upside down world where people don't know whether they're coming or if they're going. They don't know if people are men or women, men are women and women are men, and you can be anything you want to be, and truth is nothing but a construct, and history is malleable because it's all about context. It's not about truth. It's not about facts, because truth is something that is entirely subjective, entirely. And in fact, there may be no actual truth is kind of what people are told. And I understand that, but at the same time, there is reality. And there are certain things that are true and so on. So, again, I'll give it to you. I'll give the floor to you and walk me through the story as you have come to understand it, or the way that you have been taught.
Where do I start? Because you've thrown a bunch of things at me.
Sorry, I can slow down a bit for you if you need me to.
Wow, a lot of things running through my head. From my perspective, everything that you've just said, I think that you are a victim of propaganda. And
we all are, but sure, okay, yeah.
Give propaganda, but I don't know. Can I just get your view on, like, where do you stand with Ukraine? Like, do you stand with Ukraine, and like, how do you view that situation?
Oh, that's a complicated question.
Yeah.
You might get a long answer.
And it has a correlation with this. That I'll get to that, but it's just I want to hear your intake on that.
Can we come back to it, or do you really need this from me right now?
Correlation, yeah.
Okay, all right. Ukraine. Ukraine was part of the former Soviet Union, part of the Soviet bloc. After the fall of the Soviet Union and the fall of the Berlin Wall, Reagan stands there. He says, "Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall." The wall falls. He tells Gorbachev, Russia, I promise. He says, I promise that that NATO will not expand even 1 inch further east. So Gorbachev dissolves, so the Soviet Union is dissolved. These countries, Poland, and you had the Solidarity movement in Poland, you had, Ukraine, these countries, they become then independent sovereign states. The assurance from Reagan, though, that's just verbal, and that's just him. That's not like a specific treaty. It's not a written agreement. And so now what you have is countries like these former Soviet bloc countries that are now independent states. Ukraine in particular, problematic because it's been like the doormat of the world for a long, the doormat into, or doorway into Russia for invading countries for a long time. There's a long history of it. And during World War II, you had, the Soviet Union in there, and they were oppressing the people because it was a communist state. And Stalin needed to capitalize his industrial revolution, and he didn't have the capital. He couldn't get credit around the world, so he went into Ukraine and used that country because it was like a breadbasket, and he used the grain from Ukraine to fund the Industrial Revolution in Russia. In order to do that, though, he had to basically confiscate the crops from the people. So I don't want to get too deep into that stuff because there's some controversy surrounding, the famine that came as a result of that. But the people in Ukraine, they suffered immensely under the communist rule, especially in Ukraine, because the fruits of their labor were confiscated largely by the. And I know this to be true because I'm so old, Sarah, that I met people who lived through it. And I've spoken to them personally. And I can tell you the horror stories personally that were conveyed to me about a thing called the Holodomor that took place at that time, where people literally starved to death because everything that they produced on the farms was confiscated. And they called those, the Soviets at the time called them the kulaks, and they were sort of demonized as greedy, rich people, but they weren't. They were just farm owners. Anyway, that was the experience that they'd had. So when World War II comes and then Germany comes in, the people in Ukraine were like, thank God you're here liberating us from the communist oppression. Not realizing, I think for the most part, how horrific the Nazis were coming the other way. But anything's better than what we had, so they embraced that. A lot of them, not all of them, but a lot of them. And then, of course, you have this new government, the invading Germans. Many of them end up fighting on the side of Nazi Germany at the time. But hey, what moral compass did they have to look at there? Or what history? This was something new, right? They can't. There's no hindsight on how the Nazis were going to behave, and the psychological conditioning that took place to have them engage, like all Nazi soldiers, in horrific acts. I think we're seeing some of that going on today. Anyway, so you've got these two sides kind of coming in and just ripping the heart out of Ukraine over all of this time. Plus, you also had Russian-speaking people moving into the country. This is getting to be a very long explanation.
Okay, I'm listening to all of it.
So this is relevant to what's going on today because this is where the history of Nazism in Ukraine comes from. This is why Putin talks about the denazification of Ukraine. But Ukraine, after the fall of the Berlin Wall and the dissolution of the Soviet Union, it was a sovereign nation. They still had nuclear weapons in there. They said that they would give up the nukes if both the United States and Russia agreed to respect the borders of Ukraine and would never invade. Mm-hmm. So they gave up the nukes because they had nukes under the old Soviet system, and Russia didn't want them to have those because now they had nukes on the border of Russia. So Ukraine said, fine, take them, but you have to sign an agreement. So they signed a thing called the Budapest Memorandum, which very few people are even aware of. Mm-hmm. And that remained in place. Both sides signed it. They said, we won't invade. You be your own sovereign country. So fast forward to 2014, and you have now this sovereign nation still, Ukraine, wanting to join the European Union to do more trade. Mm-hmm. And they voted in favor of that. Yeah. And the president then of Ukraine said that he was going to sign this agreement to do more trade with the European Union, but Russia wanted to, of course, still have trade with Ukraine because there's a lot of value, resources. So the president of Ukraine at the time, who was honestly connected to Russia, he was kind of a Russian. He was Russia's guy, okay? It was sort of like a puppet Russian government. And he never did sign the agreement. It resulted in huge protests. Some will say that it was fueled by the CIA, that it was American, and certainly there was American influence in there, no question about that. But because you now have Russia and the United States trying to influence what's going on politically within the country. And you also and the United States is that they want Ukraine to trade more with the European Union.
Mm-hmm.
You also have this internal conflict, though, of the Russian-speaking areas of Ukraine, which are sort of the result of migration from Russia, pre-World War II, during World War II, into those areas of Ukraine. So it's kind of like Canada now with French and English, where there's tensions there, always have been. Same thing in Ukraine. After 2014, Yanukovych, he has to leave the country because the people are so upset and they're having these massive protests saying, we want to join the European Union. We don't want to be part of the old Soviet system or be part of Russia. We want to be part of the free West. That's what we want as the people, whether they're choosing it organically or because of U.S. influence, because of, say, a color revolution or a propaganda even, okay, to get people fueled up that way. Regardless, this is what the people were demanding. So during the Maidan protests, you had snipers up there. The government sent their own soldiers in. A lot of people got shot. It turned violent. People were killed. Okay? Yeah. Anyway, but the president flees the country. Guess where he goes? I'll give you Russia. Mm-hmm. Why would he go to Russia? Because he was their guy. So he goes to Russia to seek asylum because he's in trouble because the people are PO'd. He's not doing what they want him to do.
Yeah.
Regardless of the motivations behind it. So Russia's position is that that's a CIA-led coup, a soft coup, and but you can view it any way you want. Regardless, the president is out, and then they have a vote, and they vote to join the EU, and then over time you end up with Zelensky in there. The country, as a sovereign state, also is trying to join NATO because NATO has been moving further and further over. And sorry, I'm just going to turn this phone off. And so a lot of people in the chat probably don't want to hear this because they only want to hear the one side. Okay, yeah. But I'm trying to give you sort of the balanced, two-sided story on this. So where are we at now? We've got you have now you've got Zelensky in there, and he's being accused of just bombarding the people in the Russian-speaking areas and places like the Donbass for no reason, just because that's really what the narrative has been. But the real reason that it was happening is because you had separatist movements in the Russian-speaking areas that were upset because they were upset because the Ukrainian government, which was now very nationalistic, had passed a law saying that Ukrainian would be the only language that would now be allowed to be spoken in the country. They weren't going to allow Russia as being an official language anymore. So that was used as a catalyst to fuel uprisings in the Russian-speaking areas, and it turned into something of a civil war. Yeah. Russia was backing that, and they were helping the separatists. And I know we even had somebody on this show who actually fought, who was an American who went to fight with the separatists in those areas. Mm-hmm. So Putin sat back and he let that kind of fester. And yeah, a lot of people were being killed and those areas were being bombarded. But it's not just that they were being bombarded, it's that you had a civil war essentially happening there. And the separatists were being backed by Russia because they were largely Russian-speaking areas. And then Putin finally said that he was justified in going in because he had to protect those Russian-speaking areas. And he asked the people if they wanted Russian protection, and they said yes. So these are the separatists essentially voting in favor of having Russia come in to support them. Mm-hmm. So you've got this very divided country, and that was his justification for going in. That's where you get the special military operation. not a war, a special military operation to support the separatists. But he's not calling them separatists. He's just going into, in the narrative, in the storyline. It's not. They don't talk about a civil war. We're just going in to protect the Russian-speaking population. But the truth is, it was civil unrest. It was these people basically standing up to the government, and you have a conflict.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
I bet you 90% of the people watching tonight aren't even aware of the fact that there was a civil war going on. Because most people only know the story from the perspective of the Russian-speaking people, if they even knew they were Russians. Russian-speaking people were being bombarded. So in they go. Now, I'm going to ask you this. Is that right for Russia to go in there with their tanks?
No.
Right. I don't think so either. Because Ukraine is a sovereign state. And they had the Budapest Memorandum. They had the agreement that said right. And that's signed. That's not like Reagan telling Gorbachev verbally, we won't move an inch east. That's just a verbal thing.
Yeah.
Right? This is a signed declaration that all parties agreed to, and Putin violated that. So I get why he did it, though. It's because it's not really about the Civil War. It's about NATO. As a superpower, he doesn't want NATO on his doorstep.
Yeah.
Very uncomfortable, dangerous. Okay? Even if they don't park nukes in there again, it's dangerous. It does potentially pose an existential threat to Russia. So he's like, screw all this. We don't care. We're going to do something about this. They made it very clear to the West and to NATO that they would not accept Ukraine becoming a NATO country. Yeah. That's really why they went in.
It's all about power dynamic. Yeah.
Oh, very much. Yes, because when you live next door to a superpower, you have to realize that you're living next door to a superpower, whether you like it or not. And so even though you may be a sovereign country, you need to live within that reality and live pragmatically. And so it was dangerous. And personally, I don't think NATO ever should have offered membership in any regard to Ukraine for that very reason, because giving that to Ukraine is very destabilizing. That being said, from a legal standpoint, Ukraine has every right to request membership in NATO, and they certainly have the right to self-determination and the right to join the European Union to do trade that way if they choose to. Yeah. But Putin doesn't even really want that. Yeah. So this is really what the conflict is about there. I see both sides. It's very, very dangerous. I see why Putin did it, but I don't agree that they should be in there, because I don't think from a legal standpoint it's justified. Mm-hmm. Does that help you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, no, actually, I even learned a few things in between that, so I really do appreciate you going through that. But no, I wanted to bring that out because, in my opinion, I think if certain people and certain individuals, if they are supporting Ukraine and, they go, yeah, I stand for Ukraine, free Ukraine, pray for Ukraine and everything, but very, very silent within, addressing Palestine and, may even believe, Palestine is within the wrong. I usually think straightforward. I think their protest is, triggered by white supremacy. And I know that's like such a huge thing.
Sorry, what's triggered by white supremacy?
Their protest for Ukraine.
The protest for Ukraine.
Everything. I think it's triggered from white supremacy. And I know that's such a huge thing to throw out, but that's just what
Okay, so why do you think that?
To see and to stand within Ukraine, and then to, look past Palestine. and to not have any sort of empathy towards Palestine, and then to have empathy for Ukraine. That's just genuinely what I believe in. I believe exactly what it is. It's triggered from white supremacy, just because
Oh, okay. So you're saying that people who support
Mhm.
Ukraine but don't support Palestine
Not
are,
all, but the majority of people
but
is
the
triggered
people who
from white supremacy. Yeah,
like a position of prejudice or bigotry.
exactly. Due to
Okay.
it being in the middle, it's a Middle Eastern country and it's a
Okay.
Muslim country. That is genuinely what I believe in. So that is why I wanted to bring that up.
Hmm.
But yeah,
Okay.
but
So, I mean, I was originally asking about Gaza and,
yeah.
you know, Israel.
hmm
Um, we're on Ukraine. Did you want to address anything with Ukraine before we move over and talk about?
Uh, honestly, I really don't have any. I'm not even that knowledgeable within Ukraine, so I can't really say I have a standpoint in that.
Mm,
Um, yeah, I'm just not that really knowledgeable in
okay.
that, so I can't really state my opinion on that. But within Palestine and Israel, or Gaza and Israel, I stand hard on this, and I genuinely think it is genocide. And
Hmm.
um, for someone to brush off and say, "Oh, it's not genocide," I genuinely think it's ignorancy. Um,
So again, how would you? What's your definition of genocide? And I don't mean to put you on the spot,
yeah,
but can you give me an idea of why you are using that specific word?
yeah. So I genuinely, you've if you've heard, um, you know, Israel's leader, I'm sorry, I forgot his name. Um,
Benjamin Netanyahu.
yeah, if
Uh,
you've heard some speeches and their targets, we've begged them for a ceasefire. We've begged for agreements, but from so many things, and if you really do your research and hear what the IDF believes, and genuinely like everything, you can tell that their motives is not to get Hamas out or to get a certain piece of land. It's genuinely to take out the Palestinians. And that's why you see schools are getting bombed, hospitals getting bombed, children getting bombed. And, I don't know. Like, how do you view that?
I see a culture of martyrdom, honestly, on both sides.
hmm
I think that Israel has gone to great lengths to use the Holocaust as a form of martyrdom
hmm
that they use as a
Yeah.
shield. Maybe justifiably so. Maybe in some cases I think in some cases they probably have gone too far using it, and that's one of the reasons they're having trouble today, because they've used that as well to silence people
hmm
and use it as a justification for even censorship, which I think has been a mistake. But I see also a culture of martyrdom extensively on the other side,
hmm
especially as it relates to the rise in terrorist activities beginning really in the 1970s and moving through. I know that there were leaders within the Muslim community, the communities of Islam, where the religious leaders
hmm
shifted their positions and made statements justifying and even encouraging martyrdom for in acts of terrorism, where previously it had not been really approved of or sanctioned through the religion. But after the 1970s, it became more of it was something they could use as a tool or a weapon. And
hmm
that's why we saw the rise in hijackings, suicide bombings, self immolations, things of
Can you
that
elaborate
nature.
on what you
Pardon me?
just? Can you elaborate more? Because I'm really interested in what you just said. Yeah.
Yeah, so, as I was growing up,
hmm
that we began to see more hijackings, more bombings, you know, the
Yeah.
and and a shift even in the teachings, even over here in the West, where those kinds of things were looked at as just like the event on October 7th as justified, because the postmodern historians and political activists were saying all other tools have been exhausted. They don't have any other avenues available to them except for the violence. And so any act, anything they do is justified. Any act, any killing, any bombings, anything like that. And of course, if you're a suicide bomber, they recruit you to do these kinds of things, or even self-immolations. The people who commit those acts are told that you're a hero, and that any past sins that you may have committed will be forgiven, so that you instantly go to heaven. And so, I think personally, like that's what I see. Whether somewhat like, to me, it's a foreign kind of a foreign way of thinking, and I don't mean like nationally foreign, but just an upside down way of thinking. And I think it's a huge waste of human life. I don't agree with it, but I know that that's what goes on. So even October 7th, I've said that Hamas commits that act on October 7th. I think my analysis of it is that they knew, they were counting on Israel to respond the way that they did, so that they could broadcast it to the world. And that's what we've seen happen. And I don't view the conflict in Gaza right now as isolated to Gaza. I don't see it as just an Israel-Palestine conflict. It's the catalyst for a global revolution. And that's what's going on even here on the campuses, on the universities, and the unrest in other countries. It's global in nature. And that's like sort of like a proxy war for the political movement, that it is a global political movement, and it's predicated on that conflict and the violence that's going on in there right now. And that's why they knew that they would get the reaction that they did, and they were ready. Oh, did we lose you? Hang on a second. She's back. There she is. So that's what I see happening, and that's what I mean by martyrdom. They're using the deaths as a tool to win the war. So in many respects, I see the children, the adults, everyone that's dying in there, I see a lot of them as being sacrificed by Hamas in order to martyr them and use it in that way. So that's my take on it.
So, because I haven't really processed that type of point of view, so I'm really trying to, process that. Wow. Okay. So, if that's Hamas's view, or their what they were planning, and that's what they want to do, and the winning and losing thing. But didn't Hamas reach out to Israel and tried to agree and reach a certain agreement, and Israel, dismissed it?
You mean just recently?
I'm actually not sure when, but I'm pretty sure it was pretty recently. Yeah.
There was they tabled some sort of a proposal about 3 weeks ago that Israel, of course, found unacceptable, because Israel views as Netanyahu and the more aggressive war hawks, they view October 7th as an act of war. So this is what I said. This was really stupid what they did. They took the bait. They never should have done this, but they view it as just war. The international community is responding, saying it's not proportional. Yeah. Israel is saying, well, it's not proportional because we've gone to war, and you don't win a war by reacting in a proportional way. We're at war, we're going to win, because they're kind of fed up with constant rocket attacks and whatever other justifications they want to point to, but they've gone to war. So it's just a full-scale war to them. But the world, seeing all of the death online, they're like, this is way too much. What the hell's going on, right? So you're getting pushback from the rest of the world.
Yeah.
And you also have a Biden administration where you have a very kind of weak president who's playing both sides, honestly. And he's trying to cater to Muslim votes in places like Dearborn in an election year, while at the same time saying that he has an ironclad guarantee for Israel, and he ships bombs to them. And then over here, he's kind of saying, well, you guys over there, well, go ahead.
Yeah, it's funny because I even personally was rooting for him, but to push even that aside and push my views, to go be helping and sending millions and millions and millions of dollars to Israel and be funding their weapons and to be sending them bombs and weapons, worry about your own country. Not even me, because I'm a Canadian citizen, but we have other things, like the United States has other things to be worrying about than helping out Israel. And what about the homeless crisis that you guys have going on, the economy, so many other things that we could easily,
Yeah, I understand your perspective. I hear it all the time. I don't agree with it, but yeah.
Yeah, that's push that even aside. That is exactly why, I know so many United States citizens, they're like, you know what, screw Biden. You're helping out a country, and push even where you support Israel, where you support Palestine. All of your money, all your tax money, all of your money is going to support a country, okay, that has no correlation in it, but other than war, okay, and to be killing innocent people. But again, let's not even look at that. Let's look past that. But, in that sense, the United States has, blood on their hands. And now they've gotten themselves involved. And Canada even, that would be ignorance.
Oops, we lost you again. Yeah. I oh my goodness. Come back to us, Sarah. Come back. It's the CIA cutting out the internet again. She'll be back in a moment. She'll be back. I'll tell you what, hang tough. Let's take a break while Sarah reconnects her internet, and the conversation will continue on the other side of this.
The New World Order. Government overreach. The Great Reset. Mainstream media lies. Now more than ever, independent voices are needed. Donate now at freedomreporters.com. That's freedomreporters.com. Maverick News. The antivirus program for your mind.
We should change it to the brain dewormer program for people with worms in their brain. Anyway, you're back. You had a little internet trouble there.
There we go. Sorry,
Where
I thought I
were
was
we?
lacking for a second.
Yeah, where were we? I think you had the floor.
Oh, yes. So, not only America, but Canada, too. And I'm not exactly sure what Justin Trudeau's doing. Him himself is located. It's a little shit show. He's all over the place. So I'm not even sure where he's going on with that. But
okay, but Canada. Let me ask you a question. If the West stops giving Israel money and they stop providing arms, what happens to Israel?
Well, it's all about power dynamic. The second Israel starts losing and knowing that they're losing funding, and they start to realize, because again, and I know you're stuck on this idea that Israel, Palestine and Israel are both in the wrong and right, but I can't state this enough. Palestine, if we go back, Palestine, so this is exactly when, the Holocaust has happened and everything. A
Mm-hmm.
lot of the Jews had nowhere to go, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And so Palestine, because in Yemen, we have a lot of Jewish people there. It's not just a Muslim country. So, us Muslims, I know has a little correlation. We don't hate Jewish people. So that's what a lot of people tend to get mixed up, because we have personally invited them to Palestine. So that is the beginning of how Israel started. We've given them a certain amount of land, okay, and basically it progressed to, oh, you've given us our homes, now this is our home and we're gonna claim it. And then that was the beginning of Israel, and that is kind of what started the whole conflict.
So when you say they were given this property or land,
Mhm.
when would you say about that approximately did that happen? What era are we talking about?
Yeah, that was 19.
After World War II?
To
Are
be
you talking about
honest,
after World War II or before World War II?
I don't want to say anything because I don't want it to be like wrong or anything, but I'm pretty sure
Nobody
it
wants to be
was.
wrong. It's
Yeah,
okay.
I know.
It.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure it was either during the Holocaust or after the Holocaust.
Okay.
Yeah. But
And
I can
so,
actually try to
and
get
so then,
the
so then your take on it is that then Israel got this land, or
Mhm.
some of these Jewish people got some land, and then
Mhm.
they just latched onto it, and then it grew, and they just said, "This is ours now."
Yeah, that is exactly what happened. And then Israel kind of started getting greedy with it, and started taking more of Palestine's land, and
Uh-huh.
that is what caused the whole conflict. That is exactly what caused the whole conflict. Um,
Uh-huh.
and it's all about land, and now it's starting to extend. And we've asked
And
for
so,
ceasefire.
it's your view that the Jewish people just unilaterally, on their own, asserted their claim to this land.
Well, how else would you say it,
Did
or
you ever
how
hear
else
it?
would you view it?
I'm going to tell you the history that I know,
Hmm.
um, but I'm interested in hearing a little bit more about yours, and I'm curious where you've picked up this history. Was this what they're teaching in school, or is this what you're getting online?
Well, if you even like, well, what do you know? What have you been taught?
No, you first. You first this time.
Well, no, personally,
I
personally
want to
for
know because I want to know what's in your head,
yeah,
and how you got to this
yeah.
point. I need to
Well,
understand.
honestly, it's even just hearing back from the people that have lived back then and hearing what's happened after the Holocaust.
Hmm.
Because ever since the Holocaust has happened, a lot of people, we're still stuck with that propaganda and, fearing Jewish people. So they kind of really didn't have anywhere to go.
That's
And
true.
Palestine, yeah, and so Palestine offered a place and homes, and they fed them and taken care of them. If you really, really dive into that, and I wish I really could get the exact dates, but um, that was how it all started. Yeah, but where I learned this, to really dive in, because the state of Israel isn't old. It really isn't old. It's only been a thing for not that long.
Yeah.
And I've
See,
met people who have been older
I
than that.
think I see. This is the thing. I think your history is extremely incomplete and distorted.
What makes you state that?
Do you ever hear of the Balfour Declaration?
No.
Okay. Go back to World War One, prior to World War One.
Mhm.
You have the Ottoman Empire, right?
Yeah.
Then we have World War One, and
Yeah.
During World War I, the Ottoman Empire is defeated. That's the Arab nations. You have the British, who are still a growing power around the world.
Yep.
So after World War I, the League of Nations, which was the organization that later becomes the United Nations, the League of Nations agrees to give control of that area to the British, and it's now under British rule. So they have control from the League of Nations after World War I. That's the outcome of World War I. The British are now in charge. It's theirs, essentially, but you have these nations operating. The Balfour Declaration, which I think was, let me just check the date, 1926, I guess. The declaration called for the safeguarding the civil and religious rights for the Palestinian Arabs who compose the vast majority of the, but it calls for the splitting up, essentially, of Palestine into an Arab and Jewish area. But it doesn't happen. It's an idea at that time. It's an idea. And the postmodernists will say, well, there's no authority for the British to do anything, and it's not that's their land to do anything with. But the reality is that was the result of World War I. The problem is, okay, so even after 1926 and the Balfour Declaration, it didn't happen. It was something people talked about, and it became kind of a campaign. And it grew and grew and grew, and that's where the Zionist movement came from, as I understand it. And so it became a Zionist campaign. Zionists were those who wanted to establish the state of Israel in Palestine. And it went on and on and on, but it never happened. Then along comes World War II, and the Jewish people, there were some Jewish people living there already, but there was no Israeli state, and it wasn't as like it was today. And the Jewish people largely scattered around. You have Jewish people in the Soviet Union who are oppressed. You have all kinds of anti-Jewish propaganda out there. You have a thing called the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, which is a story full of anti-Semitic tropes, demonizing Jewish people, dehumanizing them, which is why they were largely used as scapegoats for as long as they have been. World War II comes along. Hitler rises to power. He uses the Jews as a scapegoat. We all know what happens. You get the Holocaust. After World War II, now the Jewish people, after having suffered immensely under the former Soviet Union with anti-Jewish sentiment and the pogroms that took place there, the terrible things that happened in Nazi Germany. There's huge anti-Semitism all over the world, even in America. I mean, it's everywhere. Yeah. But after World War II, now you've got a lot more sympathy and empathy for what's happened to the Jewish people. So the Zionist movement and the Balfour Declaration gains traction. So fast forward to 1947, United Nations. There's a proposal put forward, and the United Nations votes on whether they should create the state of Israel. Britain's in charge. They could have just, if they really wanted to, they could have said, we're just going to create Israel. We're in charge. This is the way it is. But that's not the way it went down. It went to the United Nations for a vote. So it wasn't just the Jewish people. It wasn't just the Zionists. It wasn't just America. It wasn't just Britain and the Balfour Declaration. You can point the finger of blame if you want to at any particular group and say it was their fault or they did it or they started it. But in 1947, you can find the video online of the actual vote. Still today, it's up, and you can watch. And the vast majority of nations voted in favor of the creation of the state of Israel at the United Nations. So it was all the countries of the world in what I would call sort of a unipolar geopolitical moment when the United States was the only nuclear force in the world, dominant. They could have taken over the world at the time, but they didn't. Britain, being an ally, could have imposed that on Palestine, but they didn't. They went to all the countries and they let them all vote. It wasn't unanimous, but the vast majority, I think only 9 countries voted against. Let me see here. If I can, I'll find you the exact breakdown. Even Russia voted in favor of it.
Yeah. But you say it became a country. Like, where do you think the land? Because I'm pretty sure, like, correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't there, they believed and they all voted on having Israel as a nation, but no one was ready to give up that land.
That's okay. So here it is. Okay. 33 countries voted in favor: Australia, Belgium, Bolivia, Brazil, Belarus, Canada, Costa Rica, Czechoslovakia, Denmark, Dominican Republic, Ecuador, France, Guatemala, Haiti, Iceland, Liberia, Luxembourg, Netherlands, New Zealand, Nicaragua, Norway, Panama, Paraguay, Peru. It goes on and on. The United States, Uruguay. It's just 33. You only had 13 against, 10 abstentions. Thailand wasn't present. And it was a United Nations General Assembly Resolution 181, November 29th, 1947, as I said. And so they created the state of Palestine. The world voted, if you will, okay, to create the state of Palestine, or Israel, rather. That's why it's a country. What is a country? What's a sovereign nation?
But would you say, wait, sorry. Because would you say that Palestine was there before Israel?
Palestine was an area, but it was never a country unto itself. It was never a nation state.
And what makes you say that?
Because a nation state has to have sovereignty. It has to be recognized as such by other nation states in order to have that status within other countries. And so if you look at the record, it was never recognized as such as a state. That being said, even with the resolution, there were still provisions made for the Arab side of the equation and the Palestinian side of the equation. That's why it was divided, partitioned. And so they were giving land to the Palestinian side. And in addition to that, the city of Jerusalem was declared at the time to be an international city for that very reason, so that all people of all religions could have access to that particular piece of real estate, because it means so much to so many different faiths. And so the United Nations was trying to be respectful at the time and considerate of all sides. Yeah. The problem is the Arab nations in the area, basically all the members of the old Ottoman Empire, didn't like it. And they said, we're not having any of this. We don't care what the United Nations has declared. We don't recognize this. And we are going to war. The narrative that we're getting today is what you're saying, which is that the Jews just moved in here and took over. And then they just started to expand, and that's all there was to it. And then they just they started to cleanse the area of all the Palestinians. They just pushed them all out. No, the Arab nations declared war immediately, and so now you've got a state of war. Now maybe you can. Now it depends on how you view international law and whether you recognize the authority of the United Nations at the time, or the other states, whether they had the authority to do that. I would argue that in the interests of peace and because it was at the end of World War II, they did have the authority to do that, especially at that time. That's how you end a war. It's called compromise, and recognizing that, hey, in order to make this war end, this horrific Second World War, we have to stop fighting. And so if you're on the losing side, I'm sorry, but you have to capitulate. You have to give some concessions. And even though the United States, and I'll put it to you, could have said, screw you all, you're all out of here. They could do anything they want because they had the nuclear bomb, the atomic bomb. They could do anything they wanted. They were that powerful. And by extension, Britain as an ally could do anything they wanted, but they didn't do that. They still went to the international community and let the world decide what should happen to create this place for the Jewish people. And by creating the state of Israel, they said, hey, all the Jewish people who have been oppressed all this time, you just went through this Holocaust, go to Israel. This is a place where you can all be safe. And the emigration, the movement began, and they went to Israel, as promised by the international community, not just Britain, not just the United States, all 33 countries that approved it, and the other members of the United Nations as well, who didn't vote against it but recognized it because it was an international democracy, if you will. And that was the decision that was made. Whether we like it or not, whether you like it or not, whether the Arab nations in the area like it or not, whether Vladimir Putin likes it or not, whether Joe Biden likes it or not, that's what happened. And that's why they're there. And we're dealing with that today. But the reason we're still dealing with the conflict is because the Arab nations in the area would have never accepted it. They didn't want a two-state solution then. They don't want a two-state solution now. They refused to recognize the international decision by the United Nations in 1947. They just refused to accept it, and they say it's not legitimate. And from that point of view, Israel has to go. But if you want to do that, if that's your position, then you better get ready to relitigate all of World War II, because that's where we're going.
So, if Israel is in the right, because that's like what I'm understanding from this.
Well, I don't see. I mean, I'm not saying that they were right. I'm just saying that's the way that it happened.
Yeah. Well, I'm starting to like that is what I'm taking it as, but
legally, that's correct. Ethically, morally, should they have established Israel? I don't know. People can make their own assessment on that. And if you think that it's such an immoral thing, then I guess you're justified then in going back to war.
Yeah. No, we'll go back to the state of Israel and all of that. But so what is your take on when they've taken Israel to the Supremacy Court addressing the war crimes?
The ICC? The International Criminal Court, you mean?
Yeah.
What's my position on it?
No, what is your take from that?
I think that the I don't think that the International Criminal Court really has any jurisdiction over anything. Unless countries agree to abide by the rules, the decisions of the International Criminal Court or the International Court of Justice. You see, anything political, any country, any court, it really only gets its power from a place of people believing in it, and supporting it, right? And so the reality is the ICC, United States, is not a member, so they don't really recognize it. Russia is not really a member either. So you've got the two biggest superpowers, except maybe China's bigger. Russia, the United States, not members. So how do you hold them accountable if they just don't recognize it? It's the same thing with Netanyahu and Israel. They can threaten to arrest these guys, but unless these countries have agreed that the court is legitimate,
Yeah.
then they're not bound by the terms of it. The danger in the ICC and the ICJ is that they then, as a global court, usurp the sovereignty of every nation state in the world, don't they? They then become the governing body for every country around the world. They become the world court, where they have the ultimate power over literally the entire world.
Mm-hmm.
This is a dangerous thing, and this is why some countries don't recognize it. Canada, in a moment of virtue signaling, has signed on to the ICC, one of the first, if not the first, to recognize the ICC. And guess who has been accused of war crimes and they want to haul before the ICC? Guess. Justin Trudeau.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's a guy who's signed on to the ICC, and he might just get strung up.
Yeah.
Because he said, yep, this is a legitimate court. And now,
yeah.
because of these accusations of war crimes, and by extension, war crimes against Canada, because we're supplying aid to Israel, some people want him arrested by the ICC and tried in an international court. And they signed.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, we're going to abide by this. It becomes complicated, right? Is the ICC a legitimate court in your view, or not?
Yeah, I would say it is, and I think that it's really important that we keep it going and we keep having that court, because in the end we will need someone to keep these countries accountable, not just Israel or America or just all of us. In the end, we will need to keep these leaders in these countries accountable for exactly just like Israel committing war crimes. And that's exactly what I wanted to bring up, because earlier you mentioned that you didn't really see Israel committing a genocide, and you said your definition of genocide.
I don't know. Like, at this point, I'm reserving the word because I'm not positive what's happened. I'm not going to apply the word until I'm certain that it's met that level.
Yeah, but if that court, whether it's legitimate or not, or whether it holds power or not, but if all these people within the this big level, high level court, I don't know, what is your take on that? Do you?
I think that the ICC and the ICJ, if you believe in a globalist government, if you believe in a one world government, if you believe in sort of, I would say, a global, even socialist movement, and that's where I think that the push for an ICC and an ICJ has come from. That's where the support for such a court lies, is within communists and even fascistic circles, where they want a one world government, not elected. It becomes authoritarian, and I think that's very dangerous, because that usurps the sovereignty of nation states. It undermines democracies, because it really takes the power away from people, individuals like us, who have control over our governments, municipally, provincially, or at a state level and federally. But if you have an ICC, we don't get to elect the ICC, but they can do all kinds of terrible things, or maybe even good things, but they get to dictate what happens to every country around the world. Right now, they have arrest warrants out for Putin, Biden, Bush, Netanyahu. I mean, it just goes on. Like it sounds like they want to round up every leader on all sides, and maybe they should. But that's what you go look it up. They want them all.
Yeah.
Well, that is the end.
It's a whole different topic. I just wanted to bring up that whole union addressing Israel committing war crimes. What is your take on that? Because I know you said you didn't want to really portray as what that situation is.
Yeah, like I think that there is a strong case to be made that war crimes have been committed. You always have war crimes during war. And I think more should be done to hold these leaders accountable for war crimes because I think countries are too quick. These leaders are too quick to go to war because they're not the ones on the front lines. They'll let a lot of other people die in order for for them to get their political gain. But I mean, that's more of a moralistic discussion for another time. As far as what's going on with Israel specifically with regard to that, my view is, yeah, I think that there have been war crimes on both sides.
Oh,
And,
I think I might be
you know,
losing.
so what's that? We froze up again, your internet. It's the CIA again at work, chopping off our internet. There she is.
Sorry, I think I
Sorry,
lost you for a second. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
So yeah, I think there war
So, yeah,
crimes have been committed on both sides. You?
mhm. Um, what would you be saying that Palestine has committed in what way, like as war crimes?
It's a war crime to go in and slaughter civilians who are unarmed, and it's a war crime to take hostages.
Mm-hmm.
It's a war crime to take civilians as hostages,
Mm-hmm.
unarmed people, and then
Yeah.
kill them. That's a war crime.
Yeah.
And I can go on, but yeah, there are a lot of war crimes that were committed on October 7th and after by Hamas. And I think anybody that says otherwise is either willfully blind or just a victim of the propaganda.
Okay. Well,
So
what
I
about
see it on both sides.
But what about Israel?
Oh yeah, I absolutely think that there have been war crimes committed in much a similar fashion.
I
And
wouldn't
then,
even say
yeah.
similar. I think it's to an um, extreme point. Like, for example, because I really try to keep up with the news outlet, and I really try to keep up with what's happening. But if you've even seen, like, I'm pretty sure it's happened really recent, maybe like 2 days ago, or maybe even more. But yeah, so sorry, I can't really. I'm trying to wrap my head around all of this. It's really just really heartbreaking. Basically, Israel has baited, and basically we're in a what do you call it? An ambulance? Yeah. So basically, in an ambulance, and basically, it turned out to be full of weapons and bombs, and a lot of people, innocent people, have died. But that's just recent. Like, that's just something that I'm bringing out that happened in the past couple of days. But how would you address that?
Well, it's a war crime to park your weapons in like a hospital, or put a military operation in a hospital or a school, or in tunnels under civilian infrastructure. It's a war crime to do any of that.
Do you really think Hamas would be hiding in hospitals and schools? But didn't they invade and did they find what they were stating?
Did they find?
Did they find Hamas, or did they see anything, whatever they were stating,
Yeah, we've seen multiple instances of and not just recently, but this is something that's happened in the past too. It's a tactic that Hamas uses because, look, they're outgunned, outnumbered, outfunded. They've traditionally not had the kinds of weapons to fight back in like a traditional kind of war, so they resort to these other kinds of tactics, and some of them are war crimes, and because of the martyrdom, they also do use civilians as human shields.
But do you think that's Israel's propaganda?
I think it's a real thing.
Well,
I've seen it. I've seen suicide bombers.
Yeah.
We've seen that happen here. We've seen hijackings. We've seen self-immolations. We've seen hard evidence of them using hospitals, civilian infrastructure.
And how would you say that? What is the evidence?
There's photographic, video, independent, international agencies over the years have documented these things. Journalists have also documented these cases extensively. It's
Okay,
not
and
a
which journals?
and I've read, intelligence reports from intelligence agencies over the years as well, chronicling all of these things. These are well documented. This is a long-standing tactic of Hamas and other terrorist groups. They use civilians as human shields.
Okay, let's use our brains for a second. Why would a nation or Hamas or whatever you think Hamas is, or why would that group that has asked for a ceasefire, asked for an agreement, and risk the people that they're trying to protect and use them as a human shield?
For exactly the reasons I've already stated. It's
not making sense. It's really not making sense. But I just genuinely think
I don't think. Look, I think it's a horrific thing to do. I don't think it's a, but that's if you play. You ever play chess?
Yeah.
What do you do with your pawns?
But
what do you do with your pawns? You sacrifice them.
Happening, yes, but
that's war strategy.
I know, but that isn't what's happening. That isn't what's happening.
What do you think is happening?
So if Hamas is asking for a ceasefire
on their conditions that are not acceptable to Israel,
and what were they?
I'd have to go back and look at the particulars, but if you look at if you look at what Biden just did, which was just a farce with the Biden peace deal, that was essentially what a joke that was. The guy stood up and said that this was he said it was an Israeli peace proposal, and it wasn't. He lied. He just went out. He didn't even talk to Israel beforehand. He went out and stated that it was an Israeli peace proposal. It was basically the Hamas proposal from about 2 weeks prior, recycled. And then he put it on the table, said that it was Israel's idea to put pressure on Netanyahu, who then rejected it because it was never their deal. And it created all this confusion. It made Netanyahu look bad. It put Biden in a position where he was trying to make himself look good to cater to the Muslim voters in Dearborn and other places, as I said. Well, at the same time, trying to make it look like he was, on Israel's side and doing their bidding to the pro-Israel factions in America and internationally, when in reality he was playing some weird, stupid political game that really gives a wink and a nod to Iran and the Palestinian side, because really the Democrats have sort of this quiet reorientation toward giving more power to Iran to create what you talked about, which is more of a power balance between Israel and Iran and Palestine and the Arab nations in the area, because they think that's going to create more stability. And in reality, what we're seeing is it's blown up into this. It's wrong-headed thinking. That's why you see people like George Galloway, the great George Galloway, the online streamer guy who says, hey, we should give the nuclear bomb to Iran. Why not? It'll create more balance. If Israel's got it, then why can't Iran? I'll tell you why. Because it's not going to stabilize anything. It just destabilizes things even more. We don't need more countries with the damn bomb.
But what do you think, at what point do you think Israel will stop?
That's a question you'd have to ask Netanyahu, I guess, and the people in Israel. I suppose it depends on who's ultimately in power. And today we saw, I think, Benny Gantz leave the war cabinet because he doesn't support what Netanyahu is doing.
Yeah, that's the thing. A lot of people, and the issue isn't how a lot of people when they tend to talk about, you know, the genocide that's happening between with Israel, people tend to think when we address this situation is that we hate Jewish people or we hate Israel, and it's not even that. We love Jewish people. We cherish them, you know, but it's the leaders.
Okay, so when you say we, though, who's we?
So a lot of people, when addressing the conflict between Israel and Palestine, they tend to bring up, you know, like you mentioned, the the Muslim leaders, and you know, just bringing up, you know, because again, it correlates with religion. Our religion doesn't hate Jewish people, and if anything, if you really do your research, in our book, it mentions, and we can actually, our
okay, but
Muslim men,
sure.
yeah,
okay, but
yeah,
this comes back to my question: if the United States, the West, if we stop providing Israel with aid and without military aid, what's going to happen to Israel?
Honestly, my core belief, I genuinely think Israel will not stop until wiping down entire Palestine. And
okay, I don't know. I can't predict. But on the other side, if we stop providing weapons, what's going to happen to Israel?
Well, but Israel has their own weapons. Like, correct me if I'm wrong, but they have their own weapons, right? Or
look, is it okay for Hamas or Hezbollah or any other group to fire rockets and missiles at Iran or at Israel? Is it okay?
No.
Why do they have the Iron Dome?
The Iron Dome. Elaborate.
Do you not know what the Iron Dome is?
I've heard of it, but I'm not exactly really familiar with it.
Israel has a defensive system called the Iron Dome. It's very sophisticated. The United States largely funds it, the West. It's a system that allows them to shoot down incoming rockets and missiles with pinpoint accuracy. It's very, very, very expensive. They have other security measures in place as well. And because this conflict has gone on since World War II and technology has advanced and advanced and advanced, what's been going on, Sarah, in case you're not aware, is that Israel's been under almost constant attack, where they launch rockets all the time. Thousands of them. Thousands. And so you're living in Israel, you look up, and it's like fireworks because they're shooting down the rockets that are being launched into Israel. And the Iron Dome protects the people there. They have to shoot all those rockets and missiles down, and the system is highly effective. Very expensive. That's why it costs like billions and billions of dollars in our aid to go to them. So if you've been living, you know, you talk about it goes on before October 7th. Yeah, it's been going on a lot longer than October 7th because Israel's been shooting down all these incoming rockets. And that's why I shake my head when I hear some of these online pundits say things like, well, okay, so they fired some rockets from Rafah, but they were shot down by the Iron Dome, so it was no big deal. Yeah, I think it's a big deal. I would not, could you imagine, and I mean, maybe you can, because maybe you have relatives living in situations like this, but I can't personally imagine, say, living here, raising my kids who are growing up now. What would it have been like if every day, or, you know, on many days, taking them to school, looking up and seeing rockets being, you know, blown out of the sky so that they didn't land and kill my kids?
Yeah.
Very scary.
Yeah, but then, yeah, I can't, like, I'm not going to deny that it's not scary and everything. And I can't lie and sit here and be like, yeah, Israel's not affected. But compared to Palestine, we have no food, we have no water, no electricity, kids are dying. It's
Right.
literally it's literally a genocide. But, you know, with Israel, you know, just a little bit.
So how many years of rocket attacks do they have to endure, keep shooting them down, and then finally, you know, they break through the defenses and they go in and they slaughter over 1,000 people.
But isn't that what they're doing in Palestine right now?
Well, look, it's all stupid. They shouldn't be firing the rockets, and then they shouldn't have gone in and they shouldn't have slaughtered the people, and then Netanyahu shouldn't have gone in to do that. But this is the way that it's gone down. But I think personally, it's important to see all sides on this thing, and not say, oh, look, it's just a genocide here. It's just that this happened because of that, and that happened because of this. And even though maybe they didn't. See, Israel's living under a constant existential threat because of the rocket attacks.
Okay, but what about Palestine?
Well, yeah, but there you go. So maybe stop firing the rockets.
Okay, but let's say we stop that. Do you genuinely think Israel will stop?
They've been given 5 opportunities for a 2-state solution, and it's been rejected all 5 times.
From whose side?
There were negotiations over many years.
Rejecting them.
Hamas didn't accept it.
Okay, and then didn't Hamas try recently a couple times to reach certain agreements?
You can go all the way back to, as I say, you know, the United Nations resolution in 1947.
Yeah, but back then that wasn't a genocide. That was a war.
This is a war too.
What we're talking about now.
I think it's just been an ongoing war with an occasional pause in between here and there. And that's really what we had too, prior to October 7th, was a ceasefire. And so you already had the ceasefire. Then Hamas goes in on October 7th. The ceasefire's over. It's war as far as Israel is concerned. You just did these horrific things, and they have about 140 hostages, and they want them back.
Have you seen Israel's hostages coming out, and then how compared to Palestine's hostages from Israel coming out? Have you seen the differences? Have you? And have you seen all the interviews? I'd recommend you doing it, but you can completely see a difference within
in
Israel
what way?
Coming out from Palestine. Those hostages, they come out hugging them, thanking them, and then within Israel, from Israel's side, Palestine hostages coming out from them, losing limbs, really like genuinely skin deprived, and you can tell they've been starved. You can tell one has literally lost in their nose. You genuinely can tell there is a severe difference, and I'd recommend you really.
Oh, I've seen the videos and those assertions and those claims, and in fact, my friend John sent me a video the other day of some guy spouting off about 47 different war crimes committed by Israel, and the only source that he cited was what was the organization called? It slips my mind at the moment. Euromed Humanitarian Group or whatever. In reality, it's not an unbiased humanitarian organization. It's used by pro-Palestinian media sites, but it's a Hamas-funded humanitarian site. It's all pro-Palestinian side, so it's all slanted.
There's so many sites that you can find.
I know, but that's the point. You're getting a lot of propaganda from both sides, and so today, for instance, you just had 4 hostages recovered alive by the IDF, but in order to get those 4 hostages back alive, they initiated a military operation, and 207. Hamas is claiming that, or the Hamas Health Agency, I believe, is claiming that 274 people, Palestinians, were killed in that operation. Now, the other thing that happened is a journalist from Al Jazeera apparently was holding one of the hostages for Hamas. This is a journalist. Now, if you listen to the pro-Palestinian side, they'll say that when the IDF went in to get the hostage back from that home where that person was being held, that the people in the house were murdered. Okay? But what do you do when you go in to get the hostage and it's a military? So, I mean, it depends on your perspective. You go into the house, the guy's holding a hostage, but he's a journalist. No, if you're holding a hostage, I'm a journalist. I worked in media for like 40 some years. I used to work for CTV. I've worked in radio. I've done a lot of media. I'm a journalist.
Yeah.
If you're holding a hostage, you're not a journalist. So you're fair game if you want to take a bullet in the head. I got no problem with it, because now you're a militant and you're an active participant in the war, and you'll suffer the consequences if you're confronted by an opposing soldier because you're holding a hostage. Journalists don't hold hostages. I don't take hostages.
Yeah,
here.
no,
We don't do that.
This is news to me about hearing this.
I'll listen to the other side, and they spin it up that way. It's like, oh, the journalist was murdered, and all the people in his house were murdered. Oh, were they? Really? No, that son of a bitch. I'm sorry. People like that give journalism a bad name. People like that who say they're journalists put all real journalists at risk, because they're fake journalists. They're using journalism as a shield.
Yeah.
To protect themselves from the wrath of an opposing state or even their own for their bad actions.
But wouldn't you say, because you are a journalist, so wouldn't you say you had the duty of addressing this situation the most accurately?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
So your duty as a journalist, wouldn't you say that you would need to address situations the most accurately?
Yes.
Okay, so
that's why I always seek balance. I'm always seeking balance.
And you're seeing all these indicators, and you're seeing everything right within your eyes. Okay, but you're still choosing to listen to. I'm sorry, but it is literally propaganda. Like, that is exactly what the Israel and the IDF people want you to believe, that it's acceptable, it's within war, Palestine's committing this, so it's okay for us to do this.
No, I'm not excusing what they've done, not at all. And I'm critical of what Israel has done. I'm not in favor of what they've done.
Okay.
I've said Netanyahu, literally, I've sat here other nights and I've said what he's doing is stupid.
Yeah.
And it's not proper, and they have committed war crimes, and I said that here tonight. So no, I think I'm pretty balanced myself. But
that's not genocide.
I'm sorry, what's that?
But to sit here and say and address the situation and not address it as what's happening as a genocide.
Because to me genocide has to meet a certain set of criteria. It has to I don't see what they're doing there as completely wiping out an entire culture. Not at this point. And I'm not even sure if the numbers we're getting are accurate. So I have said I'm reserving judgment on the use of that word. I'm not going to rush, because it is such a serious matter, and it's important not to let that word get watered down. Just like the word Nazi. I see people throw that word around a lot, and the more it gets used in an inappropriate way where it doesn't really meet that threshold, it does a disservice to. Yeah, that's a good idea. Now we can see ya. I think it does a disservice to the past victims of Nazism and fascism. So you don't want to just use those words loosely. Only in the right context and at the right time.
Yeah, but the thing is, when will be a good time?
How many? Well, let me ask you this: how many people have died in the war in Ukraine?
Oh, I couldn't tell you the numbers. I don't know the numbers.
About 500,000 Ukrainians,
Mm-hmm.
soldiers and civilians.
Mhm.
How many Russians have died in the Ukraine conflict?
Couldn't
About
tell you.
500,000. We now have about 1 million people who have been killed. 1 million
Mhm.
in Ukraine. Is that a genocide?
Again, I'm not really like knowledgeable with like that whole situation.
Well, look at the scale.
Yeah, but no.
500,000 Ukrainians dead. Is that a genocide? 500,000 Russians. Is that a genocide? You've got maybe 30, 34,000 Palestinians, 30 or 34,000. Is that
I'm
a
pretty sure
genocide?
the numbers are higher than that. I'm pretty sure.
Well, they
And that was
keep
since
adjusting
the
them. They
last
keep
one.
going up, but
Yeah.
those are the last numbers I heard.
Yeah.
About
but-
34,000.
But
If they're
didn't you
accurate.
say- yeah, but let's go back to what you said in the beginning, and I addressed the situation as a genocide, and then you said, in my context, a genocide would be someone committing war crimes and ethnic cleansing, and
Yeah. See, I guess my position, Sarah, is that when it comes to whether it's a genocide or not, I'm kind of like, I think it needs to be decided by a legal body if it meets that threshold. So if somebody wants to lay that charge and you want to take it to the International Criminal Court and try it, then I guess it will be determined if it meets that level or not based on real evidence. For me to sit here, though, now I can certainly say that it's a tragedy. It's probably a slaughter in some cases. War crimes, I think, definitely have been committed. But again, I'm reserving that personally. I'm reserving that word. I don't really want to pass judgment at that level until I get more evidence so that I can see that it really does meet that threshold.
yeah.
Based
Well,
on
that's
the
one thing.
legal definitions.
Yeah, but when do you there can only be enough evidence until at one point would you, start to really process and accept that, oh yeah, it's genocide, because I feel like that was, the same situation with the Nazis and everything, and a lot of people, they were like, oh, you know what, I'm not sure, and. I'm just saying, like, let's not wait until it's too late. And that is why I genuinely am so passionate talking about this, because, at what point will we start accepting? Because I genuinely believe that Israel, and because from hearing so many IDF soldiers being interviewed, so many IDF speaking, and their main motives are just to wipe out Palestine. Whether we want to believe it or not, you can, if you really do your research and see what the IDF's,
I hear the same accusation coming, directed at the other side too.
Yes, yes, and I'm not going to deny that. But who has the more power here?
Ah, now you're touching on something. There's the classic oppressed versus the oppressor argument. That's interesting to me. So where are you picking that up?
What do you mean? Power. It's power. It's all about power dynamic, okay? And we already addressed this, that Israel is already having the United States help.
Is it though? Is it?
You already addressed it, how they're giving aids and how they're giving money and how they're giving out weapons. But I don't know how else you would look at it.
Well, I mean, as I've indicated, if we don't supply aid to Israel, then I think Israel is basically gone, and they will they will destroy the country, whatever country it is. That'll be the end of Israel. They won't be able to defend themselves. They don't have the resources. If the West just cuts them off, the Iron Dome, too expensive. I mean, you want to talk about the military-industrial complex? There it is. It's like you've got a bunch of Jewish people stuffed into a tiny little spot surrounded by a bunch of enemies who keep launching rockets. And over here you're saying, well, you guys go ahead. You keep launching your rockets. We'll just give them an Iron Dome and we'll fund that. It's insanity.
I know, but have you seen Israel right now? Have you genuinely seen,
What parts?
all of it. Let's just say all of it, or even Tel Aviv,
like northern Israel right now, where Hezbollah has just launched rockets and they've been battling these giant fires that they in all across the northern area.
Let's talk about is it Tel
or
Aviv? Tel
Aviv?
Tel Aviv. Yeah, sorry, I don't really know how to say it, but
Okay.
Tel Aviv. Have you seen it right now?
What about it?
Well, have you seen it as like, just like as that nation, like that little city? Have you seen genuinely like, what it looks like right now?
Not today. I didn't look, but because like people are like partying or something. Is that what you're getting at?
No, because this image that you're portraying about Israel is like, their houses are being bombed. No one has places to live. There's no food.
I'm not say that about Israel.
I know.
I didn't say that about Israel.
I know. I didn't say that's what you said, but I'm saying that's the image that you're portraying. That's what I'm saying.
No, it's not. I'm saying that they're shooting down the rockets and the missiles that are being fired at them using the technology that's provided. But I don't think and I think that all the rockets are dismissed because people just say, well, Israel's got the Iron Dome, so it's okay if they fire the rockets. And I'm saying, no, it's not okay to fire the rockets.
Okay, yeah. We can agree on that, yeah.
All right.
But let's not dismiss Palestine. Have you genuinely seen what Palestine, and especially Gaza, looks like at this moment compared to Tel Aviv or Tel Aviv?
Yes,
yeah.
Right.
Compared to those two, genuinely.
Yeah. Yeah, everything's pretty much leveled.
Leveled in what way?
Yeah, they've destroyed all the infrastructure. They've gone in and they've bombed the crap out of stuff. No, in Palestine.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I would say it. And I just genuinely think that the government too, because you can go and ask right now. It's not even the war itself. It's not even like Palestine attacking Israel that's affecting Israel. If you go right now, do your research. Israel, the government has been, reframing the water that Israel people are allowed to access. So it's not even now that Palestine's affecting Israel. It's more of the government itself. What is your take on that?
What, you mean the aid going in?
No. Just personally, like Israel people being able to access water because they've been having a water shortage.
In Israel or in Palestine?
Israel.
I don't know. I'm not.
But that's what I'm saying. It's not even
in Israel
because Palestine has no water. Palestine can't even access it. But that's because of Israel not letting the aids come in or anything like that. But again, and it's not even Israel itself that's the problem. It's the government. Because now Israel people are not even accessing their own water. And why is that so? It's because of their government.
I'm not sure what you're talking about. You're saying the Israeli people are, I'll look it up. Israeli people are deprived of water?
Not deprived. They've been having a water shortage.
Well, they're having drought. It says here, the increase in demand for water for domestic use is caused by population growth and the rising standard of living together with the need to supply water pursuant to international undertakings have led to overutilization of its renewable water resources. Well, yeah, because water is a precious resource there in a short supply period. So, the government is, and the infrastructure is...
But that is what they want you to think. That we have had people come out and literally show the amount of water we have had originally. Well, not we, but the Israel people, and then the amount of people that we're able to access, and then the government, how much they have and how much they want you to believe what we have. But again, that is not what I'm saying. This is what I've heard from Israel people, and I could,
I'd have to look at this more. That's more of a domestic infrastructure, even local government issue within that country.
Yeah.
Not directly related to the conflict. So
it's not that we want Israel as a nation to disappear. It's the government. It's all again oriented with the government. That's what I'm saying. Even Israel people.
So back that up just a little bit. So
Yeah.
does Israel have a right, in your view, to exist as a nation state?
Yeah.
Okay. And when you say you want to get rid of the government, what does that mean? You want an election so that the people can choose a
I
different government and get rid of Netanyahu and
I'm
elect
not sure, but it's not
somebody
even
else
the
in, like
problem.
Benny Gantz?
Yeah, but it's not even the problem that is with Israel. It's Zionist. That is the issue. And majority of the people, like, if you
What's
really
it?
do
Okay.
research,
Okay. Again,
Mhm.
what's a Zionist?
the Zionist thinks, basically, from my knowledge, is basically an individual who thinks they are more supremacist because they are Jewish. And usually with that, the person that is a Zionist basically believes that, oh, because I'm Jewish, I don't think that you have the right to do so and so. But that's basically like this basic information of what a Zionist is. But what is your take on it?
A Zionist is someone that supports the existence of Israel as a state. That's what the Zionist movement is. So a Zionist can be Jewish, but a Zionist doesn't need to be Jewish. A Zionist is, well, here, let's get a definition online.
Yeah.
Zionist definition. A movement for originally the reestablishment and now the development and protection of a Jewish nation in what is now Israel. It was established as a political organization in 1897 under Theodore Herzl and was later led by Chaim Weizmann. So yeah, it's a political movement. It's people who believe or believed in the establishment of Israel as a nation state, and now people who support the existence of Israel as a nation state. I would argue that the opponents of Israel, and in particular people who don't like Jewish people, and there's lots of those these days, have taken that phrase, that word, and they have repurposed it to make it an all-encompassing way to make it a politically correct way of saying that, of saying Jew and anyone that likes the Jews. And so they use it as kind of a politically correct smear, a pejorative term that I think has been perverted. It's the real definition is what I provided to you, I believe.
Yeah.
But what it's being used in an all-encompassing way now that gives license to people who are anti-Semitic, anti-Jew bigots in order to hide their bigotry behind that word.
Yeah. Well, no,
Yeah.
but correct me if I'm wrong, because I'll do my research on the definition of Zionists and the history behind it. But there is Jewish people that are not Zionists. And there's people within.
That's right, because they don't
Yeah.
believe that Israel should exist as a nation state. And so therefore they're Jewish, but they're not Zionist.
All right. So then how can you explain to me why are there people in Tel Aviv, sorry, protesting against Zionists and protesting against Israel and admitting that what they're committing is genocide? But
because you have to look at this not just through the lens of religion, or even through necessarily history. You have a political movement. As I said, it's a global socialist, even I'm going to call it a global communo-fascistic revolution that's underway. And
Zionist?
And so, no. This is on the other side, and it's not clearly defined for people. There's this, and the reason it's not clearly defined is because they don't really want you to know what it is. But the reason you have Jewish people who are against Israel is because over time, Israel, like the West, has become a secular society where they've drifted away from their religion. And to replace religion and that is the extreme left and the extreme right coming together in this new form of globalist socialism, or liberal fascism, as some people call it. I call it communo-fascism. It's the convergence of these two things. And so, as the left in our society, as you've seen, and we talked about this at the beginning, with this cultural revolution or cultural Marxism, and how it's affected dating and in relationships and marriage and so on. That's happening because people don't go to church as much anymore. And there's been a concerted effort over many decades to pull people away from that. So within Western society, which is a reflection, or maybe even has been driven by the secular left in Israel, even in the Jewish community, where they're getting away from religion, they're embracing that political ideology. They replace, see, in communism, they don't like religion. Marx rejected religion. And so what people on that side of the equation do is they replace the church with the state. So if you might be Jewish, but if you're not really religious, then you start to buy into this far left or even far right socialist political ideology, and that ideology gets wrapped up in your head, and you begin to replace the church with the state because there's a vacuum created for people, and they need some sort of a moral compass. That moral compass is provided not by God anymore, but by political ideology, what's right and what's wrong. I guess it's okay, as I just watched a video today, if you're of that mindset, for people to ride through the streets on a bicycle nude, in a nude bike ride in London, where other people got upset with that, or drag queen story time, or casual sex, and just routine, I'll have sex with you before I even go on a date with you kind of attitude. Okay, and so when you get to that point, now suddenly your country, your religion, your Jewishness doesn't really mean anything anymore to you. And so it becomes much easier for you, and maybe even preferable in your mind, to reject a lot of that. And as also as a part of that ideology, you have what you just touched on, the oppressed versus the oppressor power dynamic, which forms the foundation for Marxism, socialism, communism, and even fascism. This is authoritarianism. And from that oppressed versus the oppressor mentality, that's why Hamas, the Palestinians, have to portray themselves as the victim, because you get power, political power, and real power by being the victim. So you win by losing, because on the hierarchy of the political scale in that kind of political ideology, you win by losing. They flip it upside down. That's why you have gays for Palestine, when they might get thrown off the roof of a building just for being gay if they go to Iran or to Palestine. Okay, that's why you get it's like, as people have been saying, it's like chickens for KFC, right? It's like, it doesn't make sense, but it does if you look at it from that perspective, because it's not about the religion. And we're losing your camera. Okay. So that's why. It's because, and that's why you see also Jewish professors who are anti-Israel, anti-Jew, even they'll say they're anti-Zionist. Journalists who are Jewish but are pro-Palestine and pro-Hamas, and it's because they're exactly what I've said. They are actually. They've embraced the convergence, and it's a political thing for them. They're not really religious. It's like, I consider myself Christian, but I don't really go to church, so I'm not really that, or yeah, I'm an atheist, but I live in a, now, see, that's what it is. They're actually atheists, but they say they're Jew. Yeah, they're born Jewish, but they're not really Jew anymore. They're atheists. They don't believe in God.
Regardless of what you believe,
Yeah.
regardless of what you believe, how does that correlate into that?
I just explained it. It's a virtue signaling thing for them, the same as it is here in the West, where it's self-flagellation. It's blaming one's self. You'll beat yourself up over the moral, problem, the complex problem of that you can't resolve in your mind, because if you are in the position of power as a Jew in Israel, and the poor Palestinians are the ones who are oppressed, then you have to side with the Palestinians, because in your political ideology, you have to embrace the oppressed and reject the oppressor. Who's the oppressed? The Palestinians. Who's the oppressor? Israel. The government of Israel. We have to tear down the government. It's the same thing here in the West. I'm seeing it repeatedly here, where people beat themselves up constantly. They see their own country as being evil. Because we've had this huge political shift in ideology where people are no longer proud of their country, they're ashamed of it. Why? Because we have blood on our hands, because we got involved in a war. This thing happened over here. So it's like, it's very easy then for the other side to exploit that, because people want to be virtuous. They want to do the right thing. But in the course of doing that, they commit suicide, political suicide, national suicide. They'll destroy their own existence in order to be on the right side of history in their view.
Well, no, I can give you a good example of that. Like, for example, Iraq. If the invasion that we did in Kuwait, I can sit here and admit that was wrong, and I empathize for the people in Kuwait. But do I just change my ideology and beliefs just because of and I can still sit here and admit that Kuwait was, victims. They have their victims and everything. I can.
You mean when Saddam Hussein went into Kuwait?
I can admit that we were in the wrong, but I'm not going to change my whole ideology just because I admit one, situation that we've been wrong, and my country's not bad. I can believe that we've done some wrongs,
right?
But that doesn't change my whole ideology and how I view my country and how I view other people's countries.
Well, see, I ask you this. The reason I think you see so many people out in the streets protesting, the reason you see all these encampments on the university, the main reason is because that political perspective, the oppressed versus the oppressor, is being exploited. And so we've got so many people now here in the West, and even within Israel itself, buying into this neo-socialism, communo-fascism, the oppressed versus the oppressor ideology, that you just say, well, look at this side over here. The Palestinians are the ones losing. They have no power. You have to get out into the streets and protest.
When they're losing. That's not even how we're looking at it at this point.
But they're oppressed. This is the oppressed side.
Yeah,
that's why you've got all this support,
right?
Let
me help you. I've known some people who were, rooting for Israel, and they were like, Palestine has started this, they can finish it, just that ideology. But came out later and they were like, okay, you know what, it's never too late to change my ideology. And I'm seeing now that Israel is doing nothing to stop this, and Israel's committing this and this and this, and they're doing this. And, it's no longer, it's not even a crime. It's no longer a war to, whose side are we picking? It's more of the, okay, right now Palestine is suffering all of these war crimes. And that is more what's happening. But if it was a war, then I can have this conversation. But it's more, this specific country is being targeted and is getting all of these war crimes committed, and
they're the oppressed.
Exactly, but it's not more of that we're taking advantage and exploiting them. It's more of that is exactly what's happening, and we're trying to help them because basically United States and Canada were basically funding it. We have blood on our hands. So when we speak up and we use our voice, sorry, I'm stuttering. When we
Sure.
use our voice, more people are more knowledgeable about what's happening, okay? And we can try to ask for a ceasefire or try to reach somewhere where we can get both evened out.
Mhm.
But right now, Palestine, we can't even look at, oh, yeah, like, oh, whose side can I pick? It's not even that. It's more literally what's happening is a genocide. It's not even an argument I can argue right now. Whatever you want to believe, but it's exactly, and that is why people that, in the beginning they were rooting for Israel now are protesting for Palestine, because it's exactly what's happening, a genocide. Whether you want to believe it's like getting exploited or not, these things are happening. And if you want to think that they're winning or losing because of the downfall that's happening, I would say no. It's literally war crimes happening. And all these innocent lives are, dying. Like all these innocent children, like, and exactly what you mentioned. You've seen all these babies without their heads and all of these things because of the genocide that's happening. And that is why I find it so important for us to speak up and talk about it. And that's why I find it really important for people to address it as genocide.
I don't want it to continue either. I think it needs to stop too. But
exactly.
But I also recognize the tactics being used, and I see the larger picture. And as I said, I don't think it is just about Gaza. I think this is actually an assault on the West. I think that we are under attack here right now. As
the United States?
Oh, yes.
In what way?
This is not a conventional war. This is World War III. You are in it right now. We are under attack using fifth-generation warfare tactics. It is, the front line really is the information war, and they are winning. And that is also why you're seeing these protests on university campuses. That is the beginning of something. You'd ever heard of a color revolution?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's what's really going on these campuses. It's a color revolution. And it's in, a fairly, I'd say, advanced stage. How far along will it get? I'm not exactly sure.
What makes you say that, though?
Because it has all the earmarks of it. Because it's it's quite blatantly obvious
what it is. Do you know why these protests are happening? Like, what are the main, reason?
It's because, as I said, the war in Gaza was the catalyst for what this global communo-fascistic or Islamo-fascist revolution, which is really, I would say, it's not just happening here. It's happening in countries all over the West.
Yeah.
Not so much in, like, Russia, okay, or in these other countries that are aligned with Russia. It's happening in the West. It's an assault on the West, and it's all coordinated. You can see it very clearly. If this was entirely organic in nature, it would not be as coordinated as it is. It's funded. We've seen evidence of that. We've seen the paper trails on it. You can see it in the way that these protests have been happening. All tents of the same color. As Dragon, our friend who goes out to some of these protests, has illustrated. I mean, he picks up pamphlets from some of the people there. These are, they're flying the hammer and the sickle on banners.
Okay.
If it's a communist symbol, he's picked up flyers telling us exactly who these organizations are. We know who some of the players are on some of these campuses, and they all, like, they show up. They have all tents all the same color because they're all paid for.
All right, so I'm not sure if you're just not addressing this part, but the reason why these protests are even happening is because of these universities are, like tuition money. They're using all these tuition money and funding it to Israel. That is why these whole protests are happening.
Is that why?
Right? Yeah.
They're taking the tuition money and they're giving it to Israel.
So why?
You're talking about investing funds in in arms companies, and that's what you're talking about. You want them to divest. Is that what you're talking about?
What do you mean?
Well, you say that they're taking the tuition money and giving it to Israel.
Well, university base. So where does the universities itself, like the whole institution, they get money from the students. Okay, and other different ways, but majority of the money from intuitions are coming from students. Okay, and those monies, they found out that had a correlation within Israel.
Research has shown, and I just looked it up again. I talked about this the other night.
Mm-hmm.
Studies have shown, and you can look it up. I just Googled it again to get the amounts. Where does the most money for U.S. universities come from?
Sorry, I had a notification. What did you say?
Yeah, which country donates the most money to universities in Canada and the United States? Let's say the U.S. Yeah, which country?
Not sure.
Qatar.
Okay.
$4.7 billion.
Mm-hmm.
Let me see. How much money has Israel donated to U.S. universities in the past 10 years? It was, United Arab Emirates was 4.4 to 4.7 billion, and Qatar. Israel was only like, it didn't give me a clear answer here. I looked it up the other night. I think it was like 324 million or something.
Mm-hmm.
Huge difference. If you listen to the people who engage in these anti-Israel tropes, they'll tell you that the Jews control the world, that they control the banks and the media and the government, and they only make this percentage of the population, but they control this of everything, and they control all the universities and academia. No, by far, Qatar, Arab countries, they're donating the most. You know who else funds universities over here extensively? China.
Yeah.
Confucius Institutes, massive funding.
Okay.
Why do you think that this is my, and I don't, this is, there's empirical evidence to back this up. Why do you think you've seen such a shift in what's being taught in universities and colleges today versus when I was going to school? And it was starting when I was in college and university.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because of the funding. And it's not the Jews doing it.
Okay, but that has nothing to do with what I just said, though.
Sure it does, because that's why you've got the protests happening on the front lawns. That's why you've got the university administration sitting there saying, well, you gotta go. And then they let them sit there for like I think at McGill now it's into the 45th or 46th day. And that's why also...
Hold on. I'm confused.
Yeah.
So you're saying that protesters are protesting because Israel is funding the universities. Is that what you're saying?
They're protesting because you have a choreographed campaign ongoing, which is they're used because they're because they're using the Palestinian the conflict in Gaza as a justification for the protests. But if you actually go and look at what's going on there and talk to the people, they're not saying from the river to the sea Palestine will be free. They're not just chanting that. What else are they chanting on these campuses in Canada? Turtle Island to Palestine. I can't remember the exact chant now off the top of my head, but they keep referring to Turtle Island. Do you know what Turtle Island is?
No.
Turtle Island is all of North America and part of Central America. Do you know why it's called Turtle Island?
Mm-mm.
Because First Nations refer to it as Turtle Island, and the First Nations peoples here are the indigenous peoples.
Yeah.
If you read the rhetoric and a lot of the politics surrounding it, do you know who else they refer to as indigenous, even here?
No.
Arabs and Palestinians. Okay. So they would be given under some people who believe in this political ideology, they would say that even those people would be indigenous here because they're indigenous people. Okay?
Okay.
So there's an ongoing concerted effort here to give all the land back to the indigenous people. This is anti-colonialism. This is identity politics. This is the progressive left. This is woke ideology. This is neoliberalism, neo-fascism, neo-communism converging to create what I call communofascism. And this is them supporting anti-colonialism, which is the pathway to destabilizing and overturning Western governments.
Okay.
You always begin a revolution with students and through academia. And that's why it's happening on the campuses. So what's going on in Gaza is just the catalyst for the global intifada or global Islamo-fascist, communo-fascist revolution. It's a communist revolution, worldwide, global. They keep talking about the New World Order, right? People have been convinced, or they've been told, or they think that the New World Order is being ushered in by Western governments. No, it's not. It's exactly what we're talking about here. The New World Order and the globalist movement is the Islamo-fascist, communo-fascistic globalist movement. This is, if you go back and read the Communist Manifesto, you go back and read Karl Marx, what have the communists always dreamed of? Global revolution. They want worldwide communism, one world government. This is their pathway to it. And Islamofascism and communism are very compatible because they both reject capitalism, they reject secularism, they reject the Christianity even, okay? They don't like it. They're against it. They're against usury, interest, paying interest.
Okay, hold on.
Okay, all of these things. So they're anti-Western. They're anti-imperialism. They're anti-capitalism. They're anti-American. They're anti-West.
But let's go back to the protests because you jumped to a whole different conversation. But do you genuinely think that these protesters, okay, would be risking, because half of them, a lot of them actually, have gotten arrested? Do you really think that they would risk not getting their diploma, not graduating, getting kicked out, getting arrested, getting a felon? For what?
30 to 40% of the protesters on these campuses aren't even students. And we've seen that in real numbers given to us by police after they've made the arrests. And yeah, a lot of them would risk giving up their diploma on that given year because they truly believe in what they're doing. So much so that, here, look at this. This is a student graduating, I think, within the last day or two at McGill University. And look at what she does as she crosses the stage to pick up her diploma. Now, if you tell me, here we go. Well, let's just look. She turns and she holds up the divest sign, and then she's going to do it. She spits on the dean right there. She spit on the dean.
Okay.
Spit on him. She spit on the dean.
But why?
You gotta have some kind of hate in you to cross the stage and spit on the dean of the university where you just earned your diploma.
Yeah, but why is one person being addressed as like all of them?
Because that's not an isolated incident. We've seen similar kinds of antics at graduation ceremonies at even campuses across the United States.
Yeah, but that isn't all of them.
As the crowd cheers her for doing it?
Okay, but again, that still isn't all of them.
Well, okay, it's not all of them.
That's exactly for me. Like, I could address the whole United States and be like, oh, just because I've had some encounterments with, people there, and be like, oh yeah, all of them are stupid, and then addressing the whole, nation and saying, yeah, everyone that's a nation and a citizen of the United States is stupid just because I've had a lot of interactions with stupid people. But
well, I'm not sure how we're getting into this conversation, but it's like
that's the same thing. I can't address just because there's been a few incidents or a lot. I can't address everyone as just because someone decided to be stupid.
Okay. Well, like, I've kind of laid out arguments.
Evidence of what, though?
Evidence of a global intifada that's underway right now, a global communist, fascistic, global communo-fascist revolution. This is not just something organic that's popped up. These are not just organic protests. These are coordinated, funded by political action groups. This is funded by foreign governments, by NGOs. It's a movement. It's a political movement, and America is under attack. Canada is under attack. We've been under attack for decades.
We are not under attack. We are just fine. We are actually we have a roof over our heads. And you know what? If we want to say, we're struggling, if anything, we are struggling because of our leaders. What are we doing about the housing crisis, the economy?
Here we go, right?
What are we?
So yeah. So this is where the conversation is going to take us down a different path.
Yeah. Well,
which is going to explain why, this gets us to why you hate America, I guess,
yeah.
Right?
Well, I wouldn't even. I personally hate America just because America never takes accountability for anything that I've done. America just goes and, does whatever they want, and, ruins a bunch of countries. And they won't even focus on their own country. You guys have a housing crisis, economy crisis, drug use. You guys are losing a bunch of youth due to the drug issue you guys have going on. I could address so many things, but I just genuinely hate America because of, how they've corrupted and ruined so many countries, and specifically the ones in the Middle East. But that is just how, and I can go on and on for that, but back to what we were just talking about, and I'll close that because, again, we can go back and forth with this topic, but genuinely, I think, it's really hurtful, and I genuinely think it's really ignorant to brush it off and say that it's a conflict instead of a genocide, and then to put all this propaganda and say, yeah, this is exactly what's happening, because you have a responsibility as a journalist to be the most accurate. So,
which is why I'm always cautious about using a word like genocide.
Yeah,
I want to make sure that it's used properly before I start throwing it around.
All right, but that's
that's the responsible thing to do.
Yeah, but again, you've already admitted that exactly what you said in the beginning. You said that you wouldn't use the word as genocide unless there was war crimes, and then we discussed it, and then you said yes, there is war crimes.
But war crimes in and of themselves do not constitute genocide necessarily.
But that is exactly
genocide is something different.
Yeah, but that is what you said in the beginning. I'm just using your words against your own.
No, I think you're mischaracterizing or misunderstanding what I said or the way that I said it. And if I wasn't clear enough at the time, I apologize, but that is not what I was saying or intended to say, and that's not what I mean at all. And let me clarify that, I'm saying that, yes, I believe that war crimes have been committed on both sides.
Yeah.
But war crimes of themselves do not constitute a genocide.
Yeah.
Genocide is defined in a different way, and it has to be reserved for the most serious of circumstances. That, I think, is still to be determined. So I haven't taken a position on the use of that word yet. That's where I'm at.
Yeah, but again, you are very responsible for spreading out these news and, acknowledging all these people. So I would just say that in mind.
I see that word thrown around loosely. Yeah. I've seen it used They were using it extensively at the beginning of the Ukraine war.
Mm-hmm.
Both sides accusing the other of genocide.
Mm-hmm.
Does even that rise to the level of genocide? I'm not so sure that it does. And you have 1 million people dead there between the two sides. In Gaza, you have 34,000. We'll say even 40,000 if you want. And I still don't know if that rises to the level of genocide. It depends on the definition. If you have an entire population, say, of a particular group of people who have a particular religion, and the entire population is only 40,000, and you wipe all 40,000 out, that's a genocide.
Okay.
Because you've destroyed the culture, you've wiped it off the face of the planet. It's kind of like
But do you not think
it's like the
Israel's
passenger pigeon,
But do you
right?
not
You know
think
what the
Israel's trying to
passenger pigeon story?
Yeah.
It extinct, right?
Yeah.
So, like so you make that thing go away. It's extinct.
Well,
It's
again,
gone.
I guess there's
That's
only
genocide.
so much. Yeah, I guess there's only so much I can say. And again, this whole conversation can go back and forth,
Yeah, yeah.
So I would say, just try to do your research and everything. But
So yeah, and so you hate America. Do you hate Canada?
I live in Canada, so that would be really hypocritical for me to say I hate the place where I live. But I would say, I hate Justin Trudeau right now. Like, and
Yeah, a lot of people
I
do.
speak for a lot of Canadians right now. Like, he doesn't know what he's doing. Like, in
Yeah.
the beginning, he was amazing. I can say that. But for now, shit show.
Yeah.
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 But I genuinely, and I can say, and you know what? Let me say this. I can speak for a lot of Middle Eastern countries too. I can say they were doing so good, and now, shit show.
Mhm.
I can say that, but I can say that America and Canada right now, it's for them to be supplying and supporting Israel, and then just not even focusing on their own, and just yeah.
Do you
but
see
again, all for them.
anything redeeming about Canada or the United States? Anything? Is there anything you like? Any good things about your country?
Um, I'm not gonna speak from my point of view because I don't really view it as that is, but I would say Canada, like, if I'm speaking really vague, you can be whoever you want, believe in whatever you want, you have the freedom of speech. And that is exactly why we have a lot of protesters within Palestine, and not even Palestine, but just in so many other topics. The other day I was walking in Montreal, and we had this whole Ukraine protest. So I think we have freedom of speech, but a lot of people move to Canada to have a better life, financially, and be more safe. And I would say, it's tends to be a safe place, but we do have our own issues. But economically, like financially, like we're getting in the pits. And I can't really speak for the other provinces and cities, but I would say in Ottawa right now, people who are making a lot of money too are barely surviving. And the economy is going down, and that's what we're saying. Like, I don't really recommend people, because Canada has a high level of immigrants coming in. But you know what? Now it's like even us Canadians themselves are struggling to live because of how bad the prices are becoming, and people are losing their homes.
Inflation.
Yeah, exactly.
What do you think causes that?
Oh, so many things, but I can say for sure right now, Justin Trudeau's not doing anything about it. Anything.
Do you have any idea what actually causes it?
There's so many things.
Not really. Not really.
Well, no, I could say for one, like, ever since, we were already getting inflation, but before, COVID and everything, we were doing decent. But then ever since then, things were going up. So that has a part of it. And then another part, Um, there's just so many things. So I would say,
Well, why do you think he's letting it happen?
couldn't tell you. Why do you think he's letting it happen?
It's the way the government gets itself out of debt, or it's the way that the government.
Mm-hmm.
More than that, it's a hidden tax on people,
Yeah.
and it allows him to give people what they think is free stuff.
Yeah.
In reality, it's him making us
Coming out
pay
of it. Yeah.
for the stuff that we think we're getting for free. That's how inflation works. Because do you know what you don't know what creates inflation? It's monetary policy. It's the printing of money. It's simple supply and demand. So they just print more money. But if you print more money, if you have more of something, is it worth more or less?
It's gonna be worth more.
If you print more of it?
Yeah, wouldn't you?
No. If you you freezing up there. Let me put it to you in another way. If you have one apple, it's worth $1.
Mm-hmm.
But then you suddenly have 50 apples.
Mm-hmm.
And the same number of people. If you have one apple and 10 people who want them,
Yeah.
and you really want the apple,
Yeah.
what would you be willing to pay for it? If it was the very last only apple, a lot. If you had 50 apples and 10 people,
it was worth less. Yeah.
a lot less.
Yeah.
So if you print more money, more dollars,
Yeah.
is it worth more or less?
Less.
Less.
Yeah, but that's exactly what's causing the issue too, because it's like, if hard money, and again, that's what I brought up with, Canada, giving money to Israel. See, because we're already in the, if our money, and this is why I genuinely do not complain about taxes, because I do know, because we have a free healthcare system, and we, we're getting better roads, and we're getting better, better schools, better, safer schools, and, just, it benefits the country, So that is why I don't necessarily complain about taxes, but I'm complaining about the inflation and everything because, there's nothing getting input that benefits us. And then again, you're giving millions of money to Israel, but again, we'll push that aside. But that is why,
Yeah. So they print money to give us free stuff. During the pandemic in particular, they gave away a lot of free money.
Exactly. Yeah.
Not just to people, but to big corporations too.
Yeah.
Right?
And in the end, we ended up paying for something that we didn't even,
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's why you got inflation, because they reduced production during the pandemic.
Yeah.
They shut businesses down, shut factories down. We weren't producing as much, but then people weren't working. So what did the government do? They responded by increasing the money supply. They gave everybody a bunch of free money and printed more money and went into debt, more debt.
Mm-hmm.
So we get inflation, right? Because now you have less things to buy, less apples, and people with more money, even though they're not working and producing. So lower production, fewer apples, more money, price goes up.
Exactly.
Because now you don't have 50 apples, now you have 20. And people don't have just $1, now everybody has $2.
Yeah.
And they're not even working.
Yeah.
And then the next month you only have 5 apples.
Yeah.
Right?
Honestly, it's really
So that's why we've got inflation, and we're still suffering from that. It's still filtering out through the system, and they keep on printing more. And now they've got more free stuff, free dental care. What's that cost? A lot. How's he paying for it? Just prints money.
Yeah. Well, no, even free healthcare itself. I even we're getting free healthcare, but are we able to access it? The healthcare in Canada is shit. We're getting free healthcare and we can't even access it.
Right. Yes. Why?
It's because of how much in demand it is.
Yes. So what does the government do to respond to that demand when they give it away for free?
Yeah, so
How can they control if it's a controlled single user, single source, or single provider system? You only have one place to go for it, and it's all free. So people will just go as much as they want. How do they deal with that if you're the government? You can't control the price because it's zero.
So basically, what we have been doing because of this issue, basically what the government has been trying to do to solve this issue was increase the wage of like nurses and doctors, and basically right now even what we have is we're paying for a whole nursing students' tuitions to promote more nurses and more doctors.
Well, yeah, they're trying to address doctor and nurses shortages, but how does the government address the supply and demand issue? Like you're saying, you can't access it. Why? Because what has the government done? If you're giving something away for free, if you just gave away apples for free, how many apples would people take?
Oh, they're gonna keep taking, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So if you give away health care, they go to the emergency room for every sniffle.
Yeah.
They just go because there's no limit to how much you can access, as much as the system will allow you to have access. So what does the government do? You've any product, you have supply and demand, right?
Yeah.
Supply and
But not
demand.
only that,
So we have and you've got price elasticity of demand. You have the price equilibrium. The price is based on where supply and demand intersect. That determines the price of something, right? And so if the price is zero, that distorts the market. And people will just go and take as much as they want. So what does the government have to do to address that supply and demand disruption and distortion? They have to limit which side. They can't really they can't adjust the demand side because that's dictated by the price, which is zero. So now you have unlimited demand.
Exactly, yeah.
So what do they have to do to the other side?
So not only a lot of people, even the people that are needed health care.
You have to ration the supply. You have to ration it.
Yeah.
So then the government gets to pick winners and losers.
Yeah.
Who lives and even who dies.
Yeah, but not only that too, but overpopulation too would cause that issue too. It's genuinely a shit show. I can't stress this enough, but yet again, even in other countries that you need to pay for healthcare, like for example the United States, people that can't afford it end up dying. But it's really about compromising and budgeting everything. And I don't know, I just feel like right now Justin Trudeau can do so much better. But
so again, like I like socialized healthcare to a degree. I think that it should be a hybrid system. We can get into that another night. But I'll tell you this. This is the other reason I want to talk to you tonight is, like, I actually love my country. I love this place. I truly love Canada. It hurt my heart to hear you talking the way you did the other night, because even with all its flaws, all its pimples and its pockmarks and all the problems, I still love my country. All of our problems, and I don't want to destroy it. I don't want to tear it down, and I don't want a global intifada. I don't want to see it burned down. And I don't want to. I mean, I think you said the other night that you can't wait to see the United States fall.
Yeah.
Right? I don't agree.
That's fine.
And you made me want to cry, because you see, I see greatness here too. I see problems. But every country does, right? I throw it back to you. Like, do you see anything that you love about your country?
Yeah. I listen, I have moved to Dubai. I could have lived in this most luxurious countries, but I seen some flaws there too, and that's a whole different conversation I can have there. But in the end, I love Canada. It's where I've lived my whole life.
Yeah.
I'm genuinely connected to here, but yet again, is there flaws? Yes.
Mhm.
And that is what I'm saying. I hate how we have so much flaws. America, though, I'm just, the second it evolves and actually genuinely becomes better,
Mhm.
I'm not going to be a United States hater. But the reason why I'm genuinely a hater for the United States is just because there's so much room for evolving. There's so much room to be better, but you guys are just not there yet. That is it.
So, when you said you want to see the United States fall, I don't want to see the United States fall, and I don't want to see Canada fall.
Yeah.
I want to fix the problems.
Yeah.
Right, and I see a lot of the same problems you do too.
Yeah.
But I don't hate my country, and I don't hate the United States. I love them both,
Yeah.
and I still think they're, to me they're the greatest countries on earth, and we have more freedom here. And I think of all the great things, and I come from a different age, where, we weren't tearing our statues down. We didn't hate our culture. We didn't hate our history. We embraced it. I have, over in the other room, a bunch of silver dollars, commemorating the anniversary of, Cartier and his, expeditions in Canada. I mean, I love the history. I love everything that Canada is. Even, and I think that the history that's being taught today, postmodern, revisionist, it's all designed to make people hate their own country. Where
I wouldn't say that.
No?
I genuinely, I don't hate Canada. Push Canada aside.
Yeah.
I would say right now I hate Justin Trudeau. I can say that.
I don't like him either at all.
Yeah. And I can say, and the majority of Canadians right now too, they dislike him. So I can say that. Other than that, let's go back to the United States. United States, I think they can do better, but it's more of I hate their history, and I hate that they've never took accountability, and I hate that history keeps repeating, and I hate that they just can't evolve. That is what I hate.
See, I think that's the thing, though. I think that's a little bit. I think that's a distortion too.
I mean, they've messed it up my country, so I feel personally, for me, I have every right to hate the United States.
So, elaborate on that, please. What do you mean by that?
Well, Iraq.
Okay.
It was never the same after, the army invading Iraq, and and we have had soldiers from the United States speak up on this too, and they were like, you have ruined so many, not even from Iraq, push Iraq aside. Yeah. But the soldiers itself from the United States have lost their lives, lost their family, and the United States has never took accountability for that.
I don't know. I think they're paying a pretty heavy price in the court of public opinion internationally. They have for a long time over it, and they still continue to do that. And so much so that even you hate them. I think a lot of people within the United States itself hate their own country, and that's one of the things that is used to fuel that. I think even the Iraq War is. There are aspects of it that I think are distortions historically, even today. I was alive then. I was actually working I was a working journalist at the time, and the narrative that I hear spun up today is not always entirely accurate. I think Saddam Hussein had some level of responsibility and should be held accountable too, because just for instance, the whole weapons of mass destruction thing. Yeah, they never found weapons of mass destruction, but I also remember Saddam Hussein pretending that he did.
Yeah, no, we can admit to that. We can admit to that. Yeah.
So that was not good.
Yeah.
And I remember sitting there saying, why the hell doesn't he just let the inspectors in and show them there are no weapons of mass destruction?
It's all
but he
about
wouldn't
power
do it.
Dynamic.
Yeah, in that case, yeah. So I mean, I don't think it's quite as simple as some people make it out to be today, but they use that as a way to undermine support and patriotism, support for the country.
Well, no, in the end, the past is in the past. There's nothing I can do to change what's in the past.
Sure.
But for America to never, to brush past it and never take accountability for their own people that have lost their lives, and for the people and innocent people that have lived there, and just everything throughout that.
Yep.
I genuinely think it's a valid reason to hate America and just so many other aligning and so many other countries. And Iraq is not just one of the victims. It's just so many other countries.
I mean, I think every country though has real sins that they've committed, and I think that the thing to remember about Canada, America, the West in general, is that we have open societies, we have open systems, and while you're quite rightly calling for accountability, as you should, keep in mind, I think it's important to keep in mind that the reason you're able to do that is because the information is open. But if you lived in a communo-fascistic authoritarian state, or a communist, straight up communist or fascist country, that kind of information would be suppressed. And if you spoke out against it, they would shut you up so fast that you'd end up in a gulag. And the reason they do that is to maintain stability and maintain control. And that's why here, even though we've got all these problems, I'll take the problems and I'll take the chaos any day, because it shows me that I still live in a free country.
And that is why
sort
I
of
mentioned,
free.
that is why in the beginning I mentioned that, like, I love my country. Like, I can genuinely be whoever I want. I can say whatever I want. I can, protest whatever I want. It's, I think me being in Canada has, brought up the person that I am today, how I view things today, and that is why, like, I don't see myself, living any other place in the world.
Yeah.
Because of my morals and my beliefs, and I just can never be in a place where they would, this is how you should believe, this is what you're going to believe, and this is what you should say, and otherwise, other than that, then you're getting thrown in jail. So,
See, that's the thing about Canada, too. At its best, we don't send soldiers. We have in the past sent peacekeepers. Lester Pierce, former prime minister, that was his thing, right? Other prime ministers too, not so much Justin Trudeau, but that's Canada at its best, and that's an aspect of Canada that people need to embrace. We need to get back to that kind of thing. But as I said, it made me very sad to hear you saying the things that you said, and you're not the only one saying them, and I share your desire for accountability.
That we need to do better.
Oh, we absolutely do. Yeah.
And honestly, like, I just think that Canada should focus on what we know better, and we're known for keeping peace. We're known for doing peace, and I just genuinely think Canada should just get their ass out of Israel. Just focus on what we need to do in Canada. We have so much things that we need to focus on. I genuinely think that we would benefit in, taking our situation out of Israel.
And so, as we kind of come to the conclusion here tonight, we've been on for a long time, and you're awesome. This has been a great conversation. I ask you this: if the United States were to fall, what do you think would replace it?
Oh, Canada.
Canada would replace the United States?
Well, because they're really similar. But what do you mean fall though? And what?
Well, that's what you said. You were praying. You pray for the fall of the United States.
Drag. Yeah, no, that was a drag. But, just America. Basically, from that is just America needs to do better.
Yeah, because I see like a lot of people saying that. It's like, the United States, it's like burn it down. People burning the flag, like literally burning the flag. And I'm like, oh my God, like don't do that. No, please don't. Yeah. But they do. And then, but I see a lot of people who want to tear it down, even overthrow the government, some people, right, in Canada and the United States. Yeah. And then I'm like, okay, well, after you've overthrown the government, what are you going to replace it with? Well, I think, I kind of laid that out. I'll tell you what a lot of people want. I already have. They want to replace it with a communo-fascistic dictatorship. But
no, that is, no.
Yeah, I'm not into that.
Yeah.
Right?
No, I just genuinely, when I say I pray for the United States to fall down, it's just basically me expressing my hate for the United States. And when I'm talking about that United States, I'm not talking about, the freedom, the pure United States, like the one that everyone loves. I'm talking about the one that people don't tend to address when they're talking about United States. The dirty history of the United States.
Okay.
The one that United States has blood on their hands. That's the one I'm addressing.
Yeah. And even there, I want to have more conversations with you about this stuff because this is great stuff. The blood on the hands, like we won't do it tonight because we're kind of running out of time. It's getting late, and I want you to get your beauty sleep. But, and I need mine because I get bags under my eyes. But blood on the hands. I'll say that. See, there's a thing called the penalty of leadership. When you're the top dog, everybody wants to take a piece out of you. When you're the United States of America, and there's a problem around the world, everybody expects you to get involved and take a stand. And I'll put it to this way: I think that the West, NATO, in particular the United States and Canada, we get sucked into conflicts.
Yeah.
And then we get into bad positions. I think over time we've made bad deals. We've made pragmatic deals with dictators that we don't really want to be dealing with. But it's like we'll just deal with this guy because he's the lesser of three evils, sort of thing, right?
Other countries, yeah.
Yeah, and then we kind of get into bad situations, and then we're judged, right?
Yeah.
Where even after World War II, when some real Nazis came over to the United States and Canada to work on the space program, or after the war, things they have to forgive people. So some people are saying Canada's a Nazi nation. Do you think Canada's a Nazi nation? Are you still there? We lost your camera again. Oh, you're frozen up. There you go.
All right, there we go. Okay.
Yeah. Do you think that Canada is a Nazi nation?
No.
No, I don't think so either.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, where's that coming from?
Well, I've just heard people here on the show say it, and I've said that we have sort of a fascistic economic system. I think we do because it's a corporatocracy. But
I would say Canada is a place for everyone. You can find anything in Canada. I can say that. But I wouldn't say like us as a whole nation, or there's a big population of Nazis. I mean, for sure, you can find someone in Canada who's a Nazi for sure.
You can. Yeah.
But I wouldn't say Canada's built up with Nazis. I wouldn't say that.
No, I don't think so either.
Yeah.
And so finally, I'm going to ask you this. I'm going to give you before I give you mine. You give me just say 3 to 5 things that you think Canada is great about. What 3 to 5 things has Canada done that's been great, or even the United States that we've given the world? It's good, positive stuff.
I genuinely think like we're making a change. We're growing. Yes, it's taken a lot of time. For example, addressing how we've taken the indigenous people's lands, and how the residential schools and all of that, we started addressing that, and we started seeing what we can do for that situation. So I do it has taken a long time, and there's still a lot of things that we can change within that, but it's still steps that we're taking, and I really cherish that that we've done that.
Sure.
What else? I don't know.
It can be anything you love about Canada or the U.S.
Oh, anything.
Anything at all.
There's a lot of things. I'm trying to pick out like important ones. Again, like I brought up, freedom of speech, freedom to be whoever you are. But I think it does come with some issues of their own. What else? I love the free healthcare to a certain point.
You just want it to be better.
Yeah, I really just wish it would get better. I genuinely, it will take a lot of time and effort and work, because again, it takes a lot of work. It takes a whole village. What else? I know.
No, we lost your mic there. You're muted. Come back to us, Sarah. Keep hitting that mic. You'll come. There you go.
There we go. Okay.
All right.
Sorry, I keep freezing up. I look like, genuinely right now, I look like a hater, but there's just not. I just never really thought about it, but I genuinely love the freedom to like do whatever you want, the freedom of learning whatever you want, the education, free education. Because like for example, Dubai, there's not like in a lot of Middle East countries, a lot of the education's not free. What else? What else? I'm not sure.
Well, let me help you.
Mm-hmm.
I love that you can go to Dairy Queen and go through the drive-through and get an ice cream cone.
Yeah.
I love just being able to go for a drive. I love Motown music, and I love that the West gave us the Flintstones, and I love drive-in theaters,
Mm-hmm.
and I love that we get to vote, and
Yeah.
I love free speech. I love maple syrup. I love Wayne Gretzky. I love Terry Fox. I love that the United States put a man on the moon, and now that we put women into space, and that we fought for women's
Yeah.
rights. And I love that we take refugees in from around the world when there are
Mm-hmm.
problems in other countries,
Yeah.
and we come to the aid of many places when there's an earthquake or a tornado or some horrific disaster.
Mm-hmm.
It's the United States and Canada that steps up time and again, the people. And it's
Yeah.
not even just the government sometimes, it's just people and church groups and humanitarian groups, and we rise to the occasion all the time.
Yeah.
Because we are leaders, we are world leaders, and I love, and I'm sorry, but I love the free market and the capitalism because it has created unprecedented levels of wealth
Yeah.
for people, and that has been shared all around the world. And I think a lot of people may be jealous of that and want it, but I think that,
Yeah.
given the right conditions, we can spread that around the world too,
Yeah.
and help people rise from from poverty.
Poverty. Yeah.
And we keep on doing that. Well, we gave the whole world the internet, for better or for worse.
Yeah.
So we've given people technology, and Canada produced the Canadarm for the space shuttle. And I mean, the list goes on. We even gave people penicillin. And how many lives has that saved around the world, right? So, I mean, these are the things that Western society has provided for the world.
Yeah.
From
Well,
the
no, let me
from the
address
Enlightenment
this.
to
Yeah.
and in the end, we're going to get to vote to get rid of Trudeau. So I
Exactly.
love that too.
Which the elections are coming in within a year, right?
Probably sometime within the next year or so.
Yeah.
Yep.
But let me do because I may look right now that I'm like, oh, I hate the Western ideas. I just think that certain things have gone, like Western feminism. Feminism was first developed to like, well, basically it started, more brought up and within America and Canada and like all different countries, but it was a lot here. But Western feminism is not because we hate the Western idea. It's just what it's called, and
Yeah.
it's not like just because I don't believe in Western feminism doesn't mean I don't believe in feminism. But again, I just want to say that I'm not a Western hater. I would even say that I've become Westernized too, because I live here. But there's just not a lot of things that I will agree with. But again, I'm not a Western hater. I just want to state that for all the viewers.
All right.
But yeah.
Well, you know what? This has been a fantastic conversation. And even though I was crying inside when I heard you saying that you hated America and all that stuff the other night, tonight you left me with some hope. And I'm really grateful for that. And I'm so appreciative of you joining us on the program tonight because I think we found some common ground. And I think maybe I've been able to shift you a little bit. And you've opened my eyes to how today's youth really do view the world and politics. And I'm really grateful.
Thank you.
I'm going to have you back.
Yes, and
Yeah.
this time I'll come prepared. And I'll, we won't have a lot of glitching, and
Okay.
I'll come prepared and accurate
Fantastic.
information. Yeah.
You come prepared and you challenge the heck out of me on something.
I will.
And that'll be good too. So this has been a great night. I'm so glad that you came on tonight.
Thank you.
Just one last thing, Sarah. How can people find you online if they want to watch your stuff?
Yeah. I genuinely don't. I'm not really active on social media, but I would say the most platform I use is TikTok. And disclaimer, my username is a funny name, okay? And I will work on changing that. But
you are mama.
Yeah,
or is it
no,
your mama or you
your
are
mom.
mama?
Yeah, so the name is your mom, and then the username itself is who's that sneaky ass bitch, which will, yes, we're gonna. It's an inside joke, guys, but.
Well, now you're a rising star, so you need to clean that one up a little bit because people are not going to get it. Of course, maybe that's what is making you popular. I don't know. I think you're a bright light, and I think that you're very charismatic. That's why people are watching you.
Thank you, and we will continue this conversation another day, and I'll come prepared next time.
You're pretty prepared this time.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right,
folks. Thank you for having me on the show. I really enjoyed it. I will be thinking about majority of the things that we've spoken about. But yeah, thank you.
Awesome. My privilege, really, and I think the viewers love you too. So I really, really appreciate it. And folks, we didn't really get into the top news stories of the day. I touched on them a little bit, but we'll get back to our regularly scheduled news programming tomorrow night at 7 p.m. Eastern, right here on the Maverick News Channel. And until then, I will catch you all on the flip side.
This has been a Maverick Multimedia production.